In fact, we've got slightly more than a quorum. So why don't we get started because we have a lot to go through. Uh, but I want to start by taking roll, and then we can go right into the presentation since the chief is already here. Janet,
Here.
Mish.
You're on mute, Mish.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Simone, Nina,
You're here.
Pam,
Yeah.
and I'm here. So that gives us, and Marty's here. Marty, do you want to, we're just taking roll.
Hi,
You're here.
thank you. Yes.
All right, great. So the chief needs no introduction. I think he's known pretty much to everybody, but he's going to go through the budget proposal for the police department, and then I think we're going to have enough time after the presentations to do some discussion kind of as we go along. So, Chief, why don't you go ahead and get started? It's if you want to, I've set it up so you should be able to share the screen.
Okay. Okay, very good. So what I'll do, if it's okay with everybody, is well, first of all, thank you for having me. Happy to be here tonight with everybody and get to show you what we've been working on at the police department. So I don't have any visuals for the personnel budget, but I do for the expenditures. So, but overall, the highlights on the personnel budget, it's a modest 2.7 increase from fiscal year 25. A lot of that is contract CBA related, a 2% COLA, as well as an additional jump in the training stipend that the officers are getting once they complete their 40 hours of mandatory in-service training. And then the only other thing a little bit more than that is just an increase in the overtime budget. So with the COLA, I've asked for an additional about $26,000 in the overtime budget for personnel costs. So again, that takes into effect the COLA, as well as the increasing costs with the filling of holidays due to their CBA agreement, which those come at a much higher rate. Some officers get double time if they work an extra shift on holidays. So again, very minor changes. A couple other things to note that as of fiscal 26, all officers in the building, all 17, will be at the top step of their contract. So all 4 sergeants and all 13 patrol officers. So, depending on what comes with the next CBA, collective bargaining, but they'll all be step 4s within this contract. So that's really it on the personnel budget and salaries. I'm happy to take in. Do you want me to take questions as we go, or do you want me to kind of plow through it, or what's the best way?
I think whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay.
I was going to ask, and what is your cycle for your CBA?
I believe they are coming due at the end of 2026. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think it's, yeah, I think it'll be July 1st to 27. They'll be outside of the CBA.
Okay.
Yes.
Chief, you mentioned an overtime budget increase of 26K. What is the base for 25?
The base for 25 was 204,000, and I'm asking for I'm sorry, yeah, it was 204,000, and I'm asking for 230. So, and just to give you an update where we are, with our current budget, we're getting to the end of what we have allotted for that. That's due to a couple different reasons. We had a officer go out on sick leave a little bit long term, and then we also had a dispatcher leave to pursue a full-time police academy. So we've been filling a lot of shifts. So, and with the potential of more vacancies coming as well, I'm hearing rumblings. No one's gone on record, but I'm hearing rumblings that there may be, 2, maybe 3 more officers leaving in the next 12 to 16 months. So I'm trying to build up for that just so we have a little bit more padding. So
Would that be motivated by them getting the top of their level and not having any room to go higher in the organization, or is it more just they've been long enough in a small town and want to move on?
I don't think it's any of those things, to be honest with you, Cam. I think
Okay.
I think it's more that they've just reached the end of their career. We have a couple officers that are in the
Okay.
twilight, and I think there's a very good chance that they're going to exercise their ability to retire in the next 12 to 16 months. So I think
Okay.
they're not leaving us to go anywhere else to answer
Okay.
your
Good
question.
to know.
Hey, Joe, this is Kevin. Nice to meet you, Kevin Bauman.
Nice to meet you, sir.
This is my first go around on the warrant committee, so I'm learning a lot of this stuff as we go here. But do you have anything you can share that kind of shows like 2025 and the delta for what you're asking? Because that's always helpful for me.
Let me see what I can.
And if not, no big deal. But I mean, if you're looking at an Excel sheet, if you could
I
put it up, that
do.
could be
It's
helpful.
just might be a bit cumbersome, but let me, because let me just, all right, let me.
And Cam and Woody, I don't want to derail the meeting if you like can't share or something like that. And
Chief, if you don't mind, I have my spreadsheet up. I can share my screen if that's helpful.
Yeah, if you have it, Michael, I have the spreadsheets ready for the other side of the budget, but if you have the personnel, that would be wonderful.
Yep, just give me half a second.
well, I appreciate it because I just don't have any context for what these numbers mean.
Okay.
Can you see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just highlight where we are right here.
If you could make it a little bigger, Michael, that would also.
Oh
be
yeah,
helpful
sure.
For
Yep.
these old eyes.
Yep, no, understood.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
That's great.
Looks great.
Yeah,
Yep,
that's
so-
great. Thank you.
So yeah, there you can see what we're looking at. And again, 2.6, 2.7 ballpark between the salaries. And so I think that gives a good picture because we're going from 249 to 256 pretty much.
Mhm.
Give or take, yeah, ballpark.
And Chief, this assumes that the current rotation is gonna continue for fiscal year 26 with the officer acting as a dispatcher.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, this is if no changes were to happen, Robin. That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Lena, did you have a question?
I think it's, Robin just asked it, but hi, Chief. So if people cycle off, will you replace them?
Yeah, so we will replace them. We actually had an officer join us the day after President's Day. So he came from Norwood and he came with 15 years of experience. So we try to be competitive amongst other agencies because everyone's in the same applicant pool. So we give them the salary kind of commensurate to where they were at their other agency. So he's coming in at a top step. So yeah, so we will replace them. Hopefully the lateral transfers, which means someone with existing police training and they've been on a department. That's ideal because it's kind of plug and play, especially if they're from Massachusetts and know the laws of Massachusetts. Otherwise, it's a 6-month academy, a 3-month training period. So it's really a 9 to 10 month turnaround before we have an officer ready to work the road. Whereas a lateral transfer, I suspect Michael will be working shifts on his own by the end of this month. So it's really 6 weeks. So that's ideal.
Thank you.
Sure. If there's nothing else on that, I can move into the expenditures, and I think I can share, Michael, or if you want to stop, then I can share. Okay. Let me just pull it up here. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Is it big enough? You want, I can make it a little bit bigger here for everybody.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
Okay, so this is our 210. This is our police department expenditure budget. I've highlighted the items where I've asked for an increase, and I'm happy to go through those with everybody. The first one you'll see is our computer basic system. That's going from 47,000 to 56,000. That's pretty much a level service request. Our IT company that we've had since we were infiltrated before I got here, they've raised their prices significantly. But they specialize in law enforcement and sensitive, products that we run. So that's why the increase in that budget. And in addition, that leaves me a little wiggle room too. I'd like to get something, it's called Digital Headquarters. It's an online, basically intranet for our officers where we can post extra checks, vacant home notices, and the like. And it's a way for us to communicate outside of email that everybody would have a login. So if we did that, we would be able to do that as well. The next bit is 5386. That's investigations. I've talked with, there's a company called Flock that does cameras, and I've had discussions with them to add a camera to our main intersection in town, which would capture license plates, and that's about a $3,500 a year cost. I know there's a lot of questions about that, so if that's something that's agreeable, I can have the Flock folks come and they give a presentation. But basically, it captures data, and that data is only used when we have an investigation. And I think we've seen it. We had a pretty busy summer with people going into cars and stealing vehicles. So some technology like that would really help us in a number of neighboring agencies, to include Wellesley, Needham, Millis, Westwood, have them. And the best thing about that program is that you can use it. You can use the whole network once you have access to it. So it's not just the Dover system we would have access. We'd have access statewide and in theory nationwide to see if a license plate has shown up in other places, that if we were investigating it.
Can I ask a question, Chief?
Sure.
In relation to what you just described, going back up to the computer system,
Yes.
is that the same computer system that those other departments you just mentioned would be using as well?
I don't know. I know in Westwood we had an internal IT department. So at Westwood PD, we didn't pay for IT service. So the vast majority of that money, I think about 30,000 of that, would be towards World Band, which is our vendor for IT. So I think most towns have their own IT department. I can only speak for Westwood. So
Yeah, I was just curious if there were any opportunities to leverage the economies of scale that you'd have with these other departments to achieve the same purpose through whatever the IT resources are there.
okay. Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure. Like I said, that's something I can look into. But from my understanding is when we got infiltrated, we lost a lot of files. There was only one level of security. And after that was done, the money was spent on World Band to make sure we had a more robust security system. Because again, we're dealing with a lot of sensitive information and stuff that we don't want getting out there into the internet and into the air, quite frankly. So
Thank you.
And on the investigations data, Chief,
yes,
is that stored locally or is that stored in the cloud somewhere?
it's all cloud-based. There's
Mhm.
no additional server space we would need. And again, we'd be able to set that up. We'd be able to set up our parameters however we wanted. So we could have an auto purge every 7 days or whatever we discuss with the vendor.
No, I was more interested in the security of the data, seeing we've had break-ins before. But if this is being used widely across the state, then I guess they've got their security buttoned up.
Yeah, no, it's a very large company and they're nationwide. Yes.
Okay.
The other, going down the list, uniform expenses. This is me anticipating other officers leaving. and us having to outfit officers with uniforms. In addition to just, stuff that gets, we have to replace, we got to order patches, we have to order badges, but the majority of this would be for bringing in and outfitting additional officers. Because even bare minimum, I mean, I think when Officer O'Brien started, I think, with a few pairs of pants, a short and a long sleeve, or 2 shorts and 2 long sleeve shirts, his leather gear, his holsters and all that, we're into that for $2,500, and that's on the light end. So the uniform costs for police are astronomical. I don't think there's anything special about them, but it's just the way it is. And, we have a couple different vendors. We use AAA Police Supply in Dedham, longstanding relationship with them. But then we also have the ability to use a couple others, to include Atlantic Tactical in Westwood. And then there's another uniform store in Shrewsbury that we could use as well. So that's the reason for the ask there. And then just keep plugging down in-state travel. This is something, I think if I look at it, I think we've already overspent this. We're already 114% of this budget spent this year. So our officers, we have to pay them to and from the station to their trainings. It's that's the law, and it's all based on the state rate. So when officers go to 5 days of in-service training in Randolph, they get mileage from 3 Walpole Street to the police academy in Randolph and back. So times 17 officers, that money gets eaten up real fast. So like I said, I looked at it this morning, we've already spent 1,700 and change of that 1,500. So that's the reason for the ask there. The second to last one is dues and membership. Right now we are at 128% spent out of that 11,250 for this fiscal. And just to give you a little bit about what that is, that's actually, so we belong to a number of different members. We're members in a bunch of different groups, to include MetroLEC. So MetroLEC is a local law enforcement coalition made up of officers all around the Metro Boston area that will respond in a time of need for a community. And with that comes dues. So their dues are upwards of $3,000 a year. And we actually, for the first time in my career, we actually pushed that button the day after Thanksgiving. So having that resource is huge, even if we don't use it terribly often. Another one is NESPIN, which is a New England-based investigative network out of Franklin. We have the Greater Boston Police Council. I have the Mass Chiefs of Police Association that I belong to, International Associations Chiefs of Police. So those are starting to add up. So I think another 3,000 in that line item would help cover all the costs that we see. And the last item at the very bottom, the reimbursement, professional development, life, those are my contractual benefits in my chief's contract that I neglected to ask for the last time around. But long story short is I get $3,000 for professional development every year and $2,000 for a life insurance policy. So that's what that $5,000 is for. And it was, like I said, it was unfunded in fiscal 25, or the account didn't even exist. So that's our police budget. That's our 210 general fund for the police budget. And if there's no questions, I'll work left to right. This one's a little bit smaller. This is our protective agencies, which is our physical plant. So as the police chief, the protective agency building, that falls under me. So there's no increases here. One thing to note, and I know this has something to do with the solar panels, is we're getting close to that 9,000 for fiscal 25 already. But I think, with the credits that are coming once the sun stays higher in the in the sky and we get warmer weather, I think that will offset it. So here it's going to be pretty much level funding across all the accounts. And then same thing with the animal control budget, which is 292. This is all level funding. The good news here is we actually have a person in training right now to be the animal control officer. She has to complete her certification. And once she does that, and she's going to be answering calls and handling animal control stuff. She's currently in the midst of that online training certification, but in the meantime, she's been able to ride with the Dedham ACO and gain some valuable experience with her as to how to handle calls and, you know, how to handle a quarantine on a dog and those types of things. So that is what I have for the expenditure side of the house.
Chief, just on that animal control thing,
Yes.
idle curiosity, what has been the impact of these dog leash bylaws? You
It's
seen
come
any
up. Yeah,
change there?
it's definitely come up, Cam. I mean, we've had some calls in about people on trails not abiding by it. And I think some of them have landed at the Board of Health. So I told Jason Belmonte, you know, to tell, you know, have them call the police department, because even in the absence of an animal control officer, it's still a police function to go out there and just remind people, hey, you know, make sure you have a leash. But every day around town, I see people on leashes on the street, you know, dogs on leashes on the street all the time. I think some people like to let their dog off a leash when they're in a trail or a little more wooded area to let them run. So I know we'll be working with Mark Galoni of the Recs Department. I'm pretty sure he's already ordered the signs to post at the trailheads at Carroll Park and other places as a reminder that there's now a leash law in Dover. You know, just as a friendly reminder to the patrons that use the trails.
Thank you.
Sure.
Is the animal control officer going to be dedicated to Dover only or shared with other towns?
So that's one of the things I had looked into when I first started, and the answer is no. She will be just Dover.
Okay.
So it's an on-call basis is how it works. So there's not really set hours. As it evolves, we might set aside some office hours for her to do some paperwork, but it's pretty much an emergency on-call basis. So if we have a need, we're going to call her. If she's available, she'll come in and help us out. And if she's not available, we still have the ability to use Needham, who's been helping us out in the meantime.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Chief, I was going to ask about that, Kevin, again. I know we had an incident over here in my neighborhood, but the Needham animal control officer showed up. Do we incur a cost when that happens?
No, Chief Schlittler's been very generous with letting his ACO come over. I've asked, and he said, nope, I'm all set. I'm happy to send him. So that's out of the goodness of Needham PD and the town of Needham. So that's been a good partnership, and Chief Schlittler's a really good guy, and he's been very helpful to me in my short time here. So.
Okay. And so is this a new line item then in the 26 budget, or no?
No, this has always been funded.
Oh.
It really hasn't been spent. I don't think the only thing what we use on this, if you see printing here, so that's for printing of dog licenses. And so we'll spend that every year. And then the professional services is 4,200. I believe 3,500 of that goes to the Medfield Animal Shelter. And that is for if we have a stray dog and we can't find a chip in it, or we don't know who the owner is, that's an agreement with them to house that animal until we can figure out who the owner is. So it's like a membership fee, essentially. But the rest of it has been pretty much untouched.
And I know, like, I have to send in like $15 or something like that for the dog license. So is there enough revenues coming in from licensing that kind of just covers this whole thing?
It's different bucket of money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I think, Robin, that goes through Felicia and the town clerk's
Right,
office,
exactly.
correct? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So the only time that works is if there were a revolving fund. So if, you know, you paid for the services, but the proceeds, so to speak, from dog licenses go into the town's general fund.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Chief,
Sure.
you mentioned at several points that some of the lines had gone over, or you were concerned that they might go over from FY25. Do you have a sense of overall in the budget, whether, you know, where you're standing FY25 budget versus actuals?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think we'll be fine. I think, you know, the only concern I have goes back to the personnel is the overtime piece, but we may be able to absorb that through salary capture of the dispatcher that's no longer with us. In that 8-week window, he wasn't employed before we hired somebody. But overall, I think we'll be fine. I don't expect there to be any problems.
And really, it seems like the increases you have are, well, a significant amount of it is the cost for your basic computer system. Basically,
Right.
IT support is what's driving it. And then just anticipating the need for additional resources for investigations.
Correct. That is correct. Yeah, the computer basic system is really driving the train.
Right.
And like I said, that's been a market increase, and that's a you know, a level service thing. That's not us going
Right.
adding another step to it or adding more protection. That's what we've been doing
Right.
all along, and
Right.
for whatever reasons, their
Right.
fees have gone up.
Supply and demand. They
I
can
support
charge
you.
higher fees.
Yeah, it's the way the world spins.
Right.
Other questions? Chief, could you talk a little bit about the dispatch and what is evolving now, where you think things are going?
Sure. I just stopped the screen sharing so I can see you all. Yeah, so where that stands, we had a study that started last July with the Collins Center, and it included us, Westwood, and Medfield. Very early on in the study, it was deemed that Medfield wasn't a good fit, so it came down to Westwood and Dover. There was an error done in that study. So part of the regionalization for dispatch is there's a grant that will cover the first 5 years that you are in a regional dispatch center. So years 1 through 3, the state covers 100% of the costs. Year 4, 50%. Year 5, 25%. And year 6 on, the towns are on their own to pay their own way fully within that regional emergency center. The mistake was that Westwood was shown as getting $980,000 a year for the first 3, and then 50%, and then 25% for 4 and 5. But the stipulation is that you have to dissolve a dispatch center. So that meant that we would get it because we were going to dissolve our dispatch center, but Westwood was taking us on. Therefore, they didn't dissolve it. And once they worked that out, they said, this isn't worth it financially. And so that was kind of the death knell of that. Unfortunately, we didn't find that out, I think, Robin, beginning of February. Is that accurate?
Right. Maybe even a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, we were at the point where we had an IMA go back and forth, I think, at
Right.
least once, and then all of a sudden it was the brakes were put on. But fortunately, we had a couple contingency plans, and our meeting with the board last night was about Holbrook Regional Emergency Communication Center as a viable secondary option. So we are in the process. We just sent over a letter of attestation, which doesn't bind the town to do it, but it allows us to move forward with submitting the development grant by tomorrow, March 6th. So there's still more work on that, but Holbrook's was the first of its kind. I think they've been around 15 years.
Right.
They have Sherburne PD, they have Sharon, they have Norwood Fire and Police. And the good thing is Chief Wright, our fire chief, worked with them at Sharon when they went there 15 years ago for their dispatch. And then he also happened to be the interim fire chief of Norwood when Norwood went. So he knows everybody over there. He's established relationships. And if it's something that the town it chooses to pursue, he's going to be a huge asset for us in making that happen. But that's still something that, you know, potentially we could see for July 1st of 26 if everything falls into place. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, logistical things that need to be figured out, you know, some building infrastructure upgrades. But it's in the process. So fortunately, we were able to kind of, you know, roll with it from from Westwood pulling out to just kind of the next day. Chief Wright and I just jumped in with Holbrook, and we're trying to work it through with them. So I hope that answers your. That was a long answer to a short question.
No, that's great. So this would have no impact on this year's budget?
No, it will not. No. Either way, the earliest that's going to happen is July 1st of 26.
Right.
But you know, both chiefs' abilities to move so quickly and having a contingency plan actually saves us a year, because had they not done this, we would have the last day to apply for the grant is tomorrow. So we would have had to wait a whole nother year. And, you know, clearly regionalization really makes sense for us. Also, we know firsthand the chief's been in touch with Sherborne, and I think they've been part of Holbrook for 3 or 4 years now. And, you know, they only have positive things to say about how it's worked for them. And as the chief mentioned last night, in a way, not working out with Westwood and being able to potentially become part of Holbrook is almost a silver lining, because they've had regionalized dispatch for 15 years. They know how it works. We're going to have far fewer kinks. And, you know, with Westwood, we all would have been doing this for the first time. So we're assuming that if things work out, this will be a smoother transition process. So, you know, I say kudos to both chiefs and Mike for just jumping on this and finding us another opportunity so quickly.
That sounds great. And Chief, the majority of the cost is borne by the grant initially. Is there equipment that we have to purchase as well?
So, yeah, so we have submitted all our quotes, or they will be submitted tomorrow by the director of that Holbrook Center in that development grant, and that will include radio infrastructure upgrades, new
We
portable.
saw that in the capital budget, so
Yeah, and it's kind of
we have
asterisk.
heads up on that.
Yeah, it's kind of an asterisk next to it,
Right.
because if the development grant could take care of it, then we won't ask for it in capital.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah, so along with the radio infrastructure, there'd be building infrastructure upgrades, right? So there'd be an intercom system placed in the lobby that someone could come in if no one was in the building and hit it. That would go to dispatch. They would send a car back. There'd be a locking mechanism to secure the vestibule of dispatch. So say, for the sake of argument, someone was being pursued into the police station by someone with bad intentions. You come into that vestibule, you hit a panic button, and now you're locked in that vestibule until a uniformed officer can help you. So all those upgrades are included in the development grant. So initially, I mean, there won't be until year 4 that there's a cost to the town. And that will be half of it, which is the numbers from the study with Westwood was 270,000 a year. I don't know. I think the Holbrooks might be a tad higher, about maybe 10% higher, or 5 to 10%. But so it's an opportunity to get a lot of things done with the Commonwealth's grant funds. And our radio, we need some more radio work. We're having some done now. We're right at the tail end of getting my first big project done with the radio system. So if we do this will get us completely where we need to be, where, you know, knock on wood, I won't have to think about radio communications for the rest of my time. So
The next 30 years.
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other questions for the chief? If not, thank you very much. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. Great seeing
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
So Robin, I think capital budget was next on the agenda.
Right.
So for those of you who don't know, Barry has had some medical problems that have kind of I'd say put him on the shelf for the last 10 days, and has made it impossible for him to appear for his presentation. So Robin has kindly agreed to step in and present the current state of the capital budget. Hopefully Barry is going to recover before town meeting, but
Or open meeting.
it may be a while here. So Robin, why don't you go ahead and start, and then
Okay.
you mind people interrupting with questions?
I would prefer that because I'm winging it. This
Okay,
was
great.
not an expected presentation, so let me share my screen.
Let me say, Robert, I'm so glad that you offered to do it, because I think both Woody and I would have felt very uncomfortable.
All right, so you should be able to see the capital budget spreadsheet. Do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Great.
All right, so I don't have a fancy presentation, but rather I thought what I would do is just go over the asks for the year and just give you a status of where we stand. So moving down to the bottom line. So this year, capital requests total $5.8 million. So as you can see, it's a lot more than what was asked for and appropriated for in fiscal year 25. And in fiscal year 25, we were actually able to use a lot of infrastructure grants to offset that. But, you know, we are looking at similar asks going out the next 3 to 5 years based upon the information that we have on hand. So what I'm going to do is go over the large items. So the first items that we have relate to fire and ambulance. And there is a $90,000 request related to the fire truck that was approved in 2024. This is additional emissions standards that need to be complied with. And so the fire department is looking for an additional 90,000. The original appropriation was close to $1 million. So this is bringing us close to 1.1. In addition to that, the fire department is also asking to replace engine number 3. The estimated cost of that is close to $1.3 million. Engine number 3 has the same issue that the engine 1, which we replaced in fiscal year 24. It has an open cab, which is no longer the standard. We are having conversations with the fire department. There is a warrant article which will actually look at whether or not to put in a permanent chief, but also as part of that ask, there is going to be a professional looking at their equipment and sort of putting together a schedule of the useful lives and when we can expect the need to replace the equipment. And one of the questions or concerns we have at capital budget, should we wait for the new chief to come in, for the study to be completed, just to make sure that, you know, the truck we're ordering is the right truck and is the right replacement? You know, there is a little bit of pushback from the fire department because, as we learned last week, there's a 3 to 4 year wait to get some of these trucks. But, you know, we're just wondering if it isn't prudent just to wait another year to get this professional study. So we need to talk to them a little bit more about that. The other items that they are asking for are just regular replacement items. So it's replacements for the portable radios, which I believe are somewhere around 10 years old right now and really do need to be replaced. So the total ask for the fire department is 1.5 million, primarily made up of, you know, the fire truck ask. And really, I think the truck is 25 years old. It probably does need to be replaced. But I just, you know, we at Capital Budget just want to make sure that we are replacing it with the right truck. And so if we were to postpone this, it would just move into fiscal year 27.
Right. It's worth noting that they're asking to replace another truck in 2 years too.
Correct. And we have that out here, you know, and we could certainly, that's why we felt very strongly at Capital Budgets that we would like a professional assessment of their trucks, you know, really make sure that we have the right mix of equipment, understand, you know, how often the pieces of equipment are being used, and should we be replacing it with in-kind equipment, or are there new standards? And I also think a professional chief that's coming in will also have some opinions on how the fire department should be operated. So, you know, we just want to make sure that when we replace things, we're actually replacing them with the right vehicles so that they have the right tools. I mean, overall, I think it's really important for all of us as a town to recognize that having a on-call fire department, even with a professional full-time chief, is the most cost-effective thing to do for a town our size. The next item. So are there any questions on the fire department?
I was just going to ask Robin, the professional review, is that some kind of special, I don't know, engineer or somebody that's technically expert at fire trucks and fire equipment and things like that?
Fire departments, yes.
Uh,
So it's a professional that specializes in doing these studies. So I'm assuming it's something akin to on-site insight, which is what we use for all our buildings that do capital needs assessments. So this particular consultant focuses on fire departments. And Mike, I don't know if you've worked with them before.
So yes, I've worked with consultants before, so they can look at the capital needs, but they also look at operational assessment as well. And so I think that's the purpose of this study, to look at it holistically, the entire department.
And these are people with engineering backgrounds that can look at it.
I believe so. So we'll have to get candidates to apply for the project, but a lot of them are prior fire service. Oftentimes they're retired. So for example, I believe it was last year, the Board of Fire Engineers conducted a study on a full-time fire chief, and that was a retired fire chief who now works in the consulting world and did a study on the fire chief staffing.
Yeah. But I guess the bottom line is it's going to defer the expense at least a year, it sounds like. Yeah.
It might, if the fire department is comfortable with us doing that. So we need to make sure that they're comfortable with us deferring that expense.
And has the consultant line already been, has that post already been funded? And what's the timeline on that?
So the consultant will not, it's a warrant article at town meeting, so it has not been funded yet. There's a $40,000 request at town meeting. So if it's approved at town meeting, which we hope it will be, then we will immediately begin the process of sourcing a consultant and sending out an RFP.
Evan, you
So I
had a-
guess one of the other things from the fire department's perspective is that for many years we've just kept pushing down the road replacement of vehicles that are now very difficult to maintain and really aren't up to standard anymore. And so their situation now is largely due to the town really not having the wherewithal to replace these in a more timely way. So we fully understand what the risks are of or what the risks are of having machines that aren't working properly. And Dover is a fairly special fire department because we don't have reliable water supplies. So all the fire engines have to carry water, and that's pretty unusual in our neighborhood. And so it adds an additional cost. And as you probably all saw that article in the New York Times recently, basically the fire engine market is a monopoly or a very narrow oligopoly. And so the prices are really determined by those vendors, and we can't really negotiate very much on the price.
Great. Kevin, did you have a question?
It was essentially the same one that Micheline asked. So there's no line item in this thing showing that consulting study.
No, it's a separate warrant article. So
Okay, but
We will
That's
get to see
40,000.
that.
Right.
We will get to see that, Kevin. We have to write up our position on it for the Blue Book as well.
okay, but so do I understand this correctly though? Like we would kind of be making a decision to buy a new engine in this fiscal year before the results of that study come out?
The way it's positioned right now, yes, and capital budgets is trying to get the fire department to agree to postponing this
Oh,
a year
I see.
so that we can look at the assessment, make sure we're buying the right thing.
Okay.
And so that we can go to the town meeting and say we've done all the due diligence
Right.
that is needed to justify this.
Right.
And then-
If not, the fire department will need to make the value proposition themselves at town meeting for why it's so important to get this now.
Is this, you said there could be a 2 to 3 year delay in getting it anyway, a wait list for the truck anyways, right?
Right, like the one that we ordered in fiscal year 24. So that would have been was it last year or the year before? I think it was at the 23 town meeting. We still haven't taken delivery of. We hope to get that sometime this year. And I don't know if part of the delay was the emission standards changed. And so we needed additional funding. That's why they're asking for the additional $90,000 so that we can upgrade. But, based upon that New York Times article, there are only, I believe, 3 suppliers in the United States, and everybody's waiting for fire trucks.
Robin, is there some sort of like contingency approval, something that we could say, like I'm just assuming like if we get a delay, even finding a consultant, and it turns out that the project is much longer than we actually could wait. And so we wouldn't miss another year waiting to approve this truck because like, I'm just saying this based on what I understood from the presentation that they had, because it's not a delay to delivery, is a wait list to get your order through. And then,
Right.
we would delay another year to then take another 3 to 4 years to get the truck.
Right, so the way this works is you need to have town meeting approval.
Yep.
In order to place the order. So, certainly we could get town meeting approval. We really wouldn't pay for this for 2 years, but it will already be a cost that the town has agreed to incur. So, the question is, how horrible would it be, for the fire department to wait another year because we also haven't taken delivery of the other new truck. That's gonna come on board. It will take them some time to get used to that as well. And it may not be an option. Again, capital budgets doesn't run a fire department, so we need to defer to them. And it may be something that they're just not willing to defer. And, from a common sense approach, it seems logical, but maybe it isn't. So I'm just flagging this as an open item. We're still discussing it with them. But right now, we're assuming that it will be a request at town meeting.
Yeah, but so then we don't have like a mechanism to say, we are approving this, assuming that we will get like the consultant to validate the order instead of just saying we approve and then next day they put the order through. We're gonna say, maybe you need to wait for a couple of months. I don't know.
It's a handshake, it's an agreement. Maybe they're willing to do that. I don't know. At the end of the day, maybe by the time the study's over, you may have gained 3 months. I don't know. It's certainly worth a conversation. My guess is if it gets approved at town meeting, if I were them, I'd put the order in.
Right.
And one clarification, Robin, is the study to determine if we need to replace the engine or what engine to replace it with?
Well, the study, we have never had a professional look at all the equipment in the fire department. So the idea was just to have a fire professional look at everything, validate. I'm sure we have the right pieces of equipment, but why not just, you're having the study, they'll validate that you have the right pieces of equipment. They'll also help us in the diligence process by giving us estimated useful lives. Right now, we've always relied on the fire professionals to run the department, and I'm sure they do an excellent job and they're selecting the right pieces of equipment. This would just be an external resource to validate that. We typically get those kinds of questions at town meeting, so it would be nice to be able to say, yes, we've had a professional come in and validate. But if we can't, we've always relied on the fire department and their professional expertise.
And
But
would
I
the new,
think the
would the new
validate-
full-time, I'm sorry, would the new full-time fire chief just have this knowledge perhaps where we wouldn't even need a consultant?
Yeah, probably, but I still think, having a study, we've done it for every other department, including the DPW. It's just part of professionalizing things. And if we find it's not worth it going forward, then we won't do it again.
Okay.
And if you don't mind me jumping in, so just to be clear, this is going to be a pretty comprehensive study, what's proposed. So, yes, equipment and capital will be looked at, but it's also, looking at response time, staffing levels. We've talked about going to a full-time chief. Is there a need maybe for some other positions that are more permanent than just on call? Training procedures. So it'll be a real holistic study.
Thanks, Mike. So the next requests are the police department, and they are requesting $130,000 for vehicles. That represents 3 vehicles. What is being proposed here is the chief's car has an odor that we have not been able to remove. So the chief and the fire chief have a deal that the fire department will use the chief's car as an inspector car, and because you're not using it all the time and you're only using the car for short distances, the odor won't be as oppressive as it is for the chief who uses it all the time. So instead of buying a new car for the fire department, we will repurpose the chief's car, replace that car, and then there are 2 cruisers that need to be replaced. And again, capital budgets and the police have set up guidelines and for the replacement of these vehicles. And then the other items are just continuing to upgrade the radios and a new fingerprint scanner so that they can do digital fingerprints. So that's the ask from the police department. The next ask is for the highway department, and the highway department in total is asking for $2.2 million in capital. The largest item is the fuel island. So all towns' vehicles, which primarily run on diesel fuel, are refueled at the highway garage. We currently have a fuel island there today that services our fleet. I'm using that term loosely. The current fuel island, the tanks are 30 years old. When tanks reach the 30-year mark, they go off of warranty. So what that means is, the tank manufacturer will no longer cover issues associated with those tanks. The tanks are 30 years old. The technology in the current tanks is 30 years old. As the tanks continue to age, there's a higher likelihood of there being issues with them, including potential leaks. The insurers are not comfortable insuring tanks that are off of warranty. And we have had a conversation with our underwriters about continuing to cover these tanks. And since we are in the process of looking to replace them, it's not an issue. However, potentially, if we were to kick the can down the road indefinitely, we may be faced with a situation whereby these tanks will not be covered, and that could potentially be a very large liability to the town if there were a spill. Now, this fuel island is quite controversial. We retained an engineering firm to do a study for us with respect to replacing the fuel island. The parameters that they were given were quite simple. We asked them to look at and try and find the most cost-effective way of replacing the fuel island, and also taking into consideration some safety concerns with the current location that were raised by both the fire chief and the police chief. So the consultants looked at 3 potential sites, all in the highway garage facility. The one site was in the front of the building, kind of close to where the Dunkin' Donuts is. The second site was looking at where it is today. And the third site is behind the town garage. At the end of the day, the consultants recommended moving the fuel island to the back of the town garage. That way we would address the safety concerns that arose or were discussed by both chiefs. And also, it's actually the most cost-effective scenario. So let me go over why that is. So if we were to move or to replace the current fuel island and put it back in a new island in the current location, there would be a need for us as a town to set up a temporary fueling station. The cost of that temporary fueling station for a 6-month period, which is the estimated time for construction, would be $60,000. And each additional month is approximately $8,500. So if the construction went longer than expected, it would cost us, you know, an additional $8,500 per month. It is really not cost effective, or neither does it make sense to utilize a commercial facility to refuel our trucks. They're not open 24 hours a day. Also, the cost of fuel is approximately 35 cents more a gallon at a commercial facility than what we pay for it under the state program to purchase gasoline. So we really would need to put in this temporary station. There is a lot of angst by abutters or citizens that live on Meeting House Road. Their concerns are that the new proposed location is closer to Meeting House Road than the current location. That is actually not correct. We actually did the measurements, and it's a little bit further away with the new proposed location. There are also concerns regarding an increase in potential fire hazard, it being so close to the cell tower. Again, the newer technology is much more advanced than the 30-year-old tanks. There is no more risk than there is today. As a matter of fact, even if the cell tower were to fall on this fuel station, it would not cause a fire, nor would it be damaged, because they're tested. And I can't recall, Mike, you might recall the poundage. I mean, basically even bullet holes, you know, somebody shooting at it wouldn't damage it. The other thing we asked to include in the proposal that we're going to get is a fire suppression system, which, based upon what the engineers know, they believe would add potentially 50,000 to maybe 90,000, but they're thinking it's more like 50,000 to the cost of this fuel island. There has also been concerns that have come up from residents about there being additional risk because the power lines are above ground and the trucks could hit it, and that could spark additional fires. As part of this project, it was always part of the project that the power lines would be put underground by Eversource. And as a matter of fact, that will happen even before this project begins. The planning board had a couple of conditions with respect to the site plan review, and all of those conditions will be met, and any questions that that arose have been addressed by the consultants, and it really does look like this is actually the best site to put this fuel island. So it's going to come before the Board of Selectmen on the 25th of March, and we will be voting on that site. Both Dave and I met individually with the consultants and both got all of our questions answered. And I think we're just waiting for an answer from the underwriter on an item, and then all the issues that we've had will be resolved. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the fuel island that you would like addressed.
I just had a question on a little bit more background on the vehicles that use this fuel island. I assume are from the DPW, police, and fire primarily.
Correct.
And do we have any data on how many gallons per year? This is all gasoline we're talking about, right?
And diesel.
Diesel and gasoline. Any idea in terms of the volume of usage that
Off the top of my head, no. I know we have that. We could probably get that information for you, Marty.
Yeah.
I don't know off the top of
and most of the mileage is being within the town of Dover, right?
Yes.
and-
I mean, you know, some of the police, they go to court or they go to training, but definitely the big DPW vehicles, it's all in the town of Dover.
Right. And I guess I'm wondering, is there some, I keep bringing this up, not just with this, but with other things. There's a bunch of small towns around here and everybody's probably building their own fuel island. Is there some way to share this in a way where they might have to drive over to Needham or Westwood to fill up the trucks? And how frequently do they have to do it? They probably don't use up a tank, once a week or something. They go and fill it up.
Well, you know, it depends, like during a big snowstorm, and that's what they're trying to address is times where they're large snowstorms and they have to keep running, for 12, 13, 14 hours at a time. And it's just a lot more efficient to have the fuel island in your town from a operations standpoint.
Yeah. If it didn't cost $1.5 million, I'd agree with you.
Right. And we certainly have not seen any regionalization of fuel islands. We could see if we can get a better answer for you, but.
And it sounds like you thought about a commercial place, but it sounds like
Right.
those expenses.
Right.
I wonder if that differential, if we knew the volume, because the biggest differential sounds like the 35 cents more per gallon. How does that amortize against the $1.5 million over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Robin, is the warrant for both approval, or is approval of buying one and then site selection? Are those kind of two different things?
No. So there needs to be an approved site. I mean, if we can't get an approved site, I don't know, there would be no place to put this. So we have to approve the site. So the planning board has approved the site with the conditions that are in place. And now the way the process works is it comes to the Board of Selectmen next. And we will vote on approval of the site or not. And if we don't approve the site, then it would most likely delay this, a year, because we would have to find another site. But the consultants did go through why the other two sites just aren't as good as the site behind. behind the garage.
Robin, I know that there's a time issue with these tanks, being sort of at the end of, at the end of insurable life. But I was at the planning board meetings where this had been discussed, and I know, obviously the residents of both Meeting House and Haven were concerned. Someone had mentioned the Dedham Street over by Carroll Park, and I just was wondering, I know the consultant hadn't considered that, but is that even a viable possibility, or?
So it isn't really, it's not even paved. So the individual was suggesting the compost area off of close to Carroll Park. And it just, it's not paved going in and out of there. And logistically, it just doesn't make any sense moving the fuel station over there. It also needs to tie into a stormwater system, and we don't have any of the infrastructure there. And we do have all of that infrastructure at the town garage, so.
Robin, are these tanks above ground or underground?
They're above ground.
Okay.
They're above ground on a concrete slab. They have mechanisms in them where they automatically shut off when at the 95% level. There are also cameras that will be able to see who's filling up and who's there. Also, the newer tanks will send alerts to 3 town employees if something is amiss, like if a sensor picks something up. So those are much better system. That's a much better system than what we have today.
Yeah, and there's no technology at this point to try and reinforce or put an outer coating on the existing tanks to get some additional years out of it.
No, that wasn't given to us as an option. And I believe we also, our biggest concern are the insurance underwriters.
Yeah.
And the new tanks are reinforced internally with concrete. They're just a whole lot safer than the older tanks.
I think on the residential side, there's something called Roth tanks, which are double tanks and have lifetime warranties. I don't know if they do that on the commercial side.
I just got one of those, Martin.
Yeah, I have one myself.
Yeah.
I went to heat pumps.
Me too.
Good for you.
The last thing on the site section, the transfer station, is that just not in play here?
No, I mean, there's barely enough room at the transfer station right now for the things that we have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're running out of space there too.
I didn't realize that. Seems like a pretty big space to me, but what do I know?
Yeah, well, you have to get trucks in and out of there, so.
I see. Okay.
Then, again, the other items are, we just haven't replaced trucks in many, many, many years. I mean, we still have, I think this 6-wheel dump plow truck we have pictures of in the 1975 Blizzard. So I think we've gotten kind of our money's worth. So again, these are the replacements that the highway is asking for. It will be offset by $250,000, which was a sum that was approved at town meeting last year for a roll-on, roll-off truck. And instead of purchasing that, we outsourced that service, and it's worked out really well. So those funds will be used to offset the cost of some of the other pieces of equipment that are being asked for. Also, since we now have a quasi DPW, the mowers both for the cemetery and Park and Rec are included in the ask from the DPW.
I'm wondering, Robin, I hadn't thought of this before, but is there an opportunity to lease services for some of these other vehicles so we didn't have to buy them?
We we have outsourced some of the lawn care, and that has reduced the amount of lawn equipment that we've needed. Certainly we can talk to Kevin. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's an option. That's a good
Yeah.
question. We can submit it to him.
Yeah, I simply hadn't thought of it before when we were talking about it in capital budget.
Right. The next item is really falls under the selectmen's budget, and we need to replace the HVAC system at the library. And, we've been, thanks to Barry, we've been really creative in replacing the library cooling and heating systems with heat pumps. About 2 years ago, we had a consultant come in that quoted 1.4 million to replace the HVAC system in the library with a fancy system with controls. I think the controls alone cost 700,000. And instead we've gone to these splits and split heat pumps, and they're working really well. And the library staff is finding them easy to use. And I think we replaced the first floor, and now we're working on the second floor. And this right now is our estimate for that cost. Did I get that right, Cam?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, that quote was just for the first floor, right?
Right. Right. And then there's just some repairs that the library is requesting, and the roof needs to get done. This $180,000 is a new item. It's for the Carroll House barn and roof replacement. The Carroll House is a historic house. It's right in front of the baseball fields at Carroll Park. I believe the cost of the roof is quite expensive because it has to meet the historic requirements. So right now, this is our best estimate. The roof is leaking, but we're looking to see if it can be patched, and if maybe we could get a few more years out of the roof and move this cost out, or maybe find a less expensive solution to replacing that roof. It was a last minute
Robin.
add-on, so we're trying to get all the information related to it.
Robin, sorry, I probably should know this, but what happens at the Carroll House barn? Like, is there something operating out of the?
It's somewhat, it's a museum, and actually the Historic Society has a tribute coming up to Amelia Peabody.
Yeah.
And they're going to be using the barn to display many of her sculptures. It's just a historic home in Dover that's a museum, basically.
Got it. Thank you.
So I talked to Barry about this yesterday, and
Okay.
one of the things that's an issue is that there's it's a cedar shingle roof.
Right.
Apparently, a lot of the cedar shingles come from Canada. So
Oh, yeah.
replacing this year could be buying high. So if the tariffs remain in place, so having some ability to defer this may actually save us a significant contribution.
Right.
Or you can get some Irish contractors to put a thatched roof on there, right?
Oh, that could look nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I guess I can't. Are you saying though that like there's the National Register of Historic Homes or something requires we can just have an old fashioned barn raising and buy the materials, and people in town that are handy just put a new roof on? I just can't imagine it. 180,000 sounds really high to me.
It's really expensive.
According to Barry, an awful lot of it is the shingles themselves, not the application. So lumber is exceptionally expensive now, even before the tariffs. But the tariffs could significantly affect the the cost of these.
But if we use a different material, like who's gonna know or what's gonna happen?
Well,
Well, the
it's a
Historic
site, so you can't-
Society is very rigid.
Yeah. Well, and it's a historic site, so you can't change the character of the site by changing the materials.
I
Huh.
kind of I understand, but I kind of like try to agree a little bit with Kevin. Like out of curiosity, is like what happens like if we don't have access to the kind of shingle that they have there? Like we let the whole thing fall apart because the historical society will not accept a different kind of roof?
You know, we need to have a conversation with them. I don't know if because it's on the historic register that you have any choice. So we would need to get an answer to that question. You know, again, this was a last minute ad and we know, you know, what they asked for was to get a proposal with cedar shingles, so.
Hey, Robin, how much does the Carroll House, just historically, what do they ask for from the town in general? Is it generally continuous asked, or is this pretty unusual?
That's an excellent question. I can't remember the last time they asked for something. Cam, do you?
No, I
No,
certainly
I mean, it's very
don't.
unusual. It's really rare. You know, some of the things that they do are funded through fundraisers, so I don't recall the last time. We certainly have records. That's a good question. Let me see how much we've actually spent as a town on capital for the Carroll House.
And so the town does own the house.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there
And we can pull those numbers, but so as I understand it, so you're right, the town owns a house and the town has been historically responsible for capital improvements. But the society, and in fact, they have a curator who maintains kind of the daily repairs and things like that. But the town has historically has handled the capital repairs, but we can certainly get some pricing, some numbers on what we spent in the past.
Right. I just don't remember, Mike.
Mike, how long do you think that roof has been on there that they're replacing?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
That's a really great question. I don't know.
It's been 1646.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like they budget like the rest of the town. When it happens,
Yeah.
they replace it.
It started leaking. They were like, yikes, we need a new roof.
Yeah, it was built in 1774
Yeah.
originally, but I have no idea when if this roof is original or if there's been some repairs. I just don't know.
Maybe that fundraising route might be the way, Robin, for part of it anyway.
Yeah, I would look into that because if it has been replaced and it wasn't replaced with cedar, I don't know. Or could we do a petition to the National Historic Register and say maybe they would grant exceptions? Like, look, we can't get these materials, so can we do this? It's just as simple as that, you know?
Kevin, you should have heard the wrath we got at Capitol for going with architectural shingles instead of slate shingles on the townhouse.
All right.
Do they give a lifetime guarantee, or what is the lifetime, I should say, of a cedar roof? Is it any, I mean, is there any economy in it? That's so much money, 180K, but does it last longer as well? Or is it just the aesthetics?
Excellent question. We'll get you an answer.
Google says 30 years with proper maintenance and up to 50 years with premium materials.
Okay, you did the Google search. Great. Thank you.
But you know, I think it's good. We should ask Carl when the last time it was replaced and what it was replaced with. So I'm sure we have those records.
Yeah, maybe it's still under warranty.
Carl would know that. So then Park and Rec is looking to replace their department van. The schools have a flooring program, so they're looking to continue with the replacement of the flooring, so Chickering School, and I believe this is the last installment, so all the flooring will be replaced after this is done. And then the big item here is the replacement of the turf field at the region, as well as improvements to the stadium field. And this is a placeholder for $2 million. I did learn today that the school committee voted to utilize $350,000 of E&D to offset the town's assessments with respect to the turf replacement, as well as the renovation of the stadium facility. The current estimate of Dover's assessment is, instead of the almost 1.1 million, we're now looking at 830,000, but we don't have final bids in yet, and we do expect to get those bids in, I believe, next week. I did have an extensive conversation with the business manager about, whether or not there was any ability to get some private funding to help offset some of the costs for this. And unbeknownst to me, last year, the boosters actually funded 100% all of the bleacher renovations at the stadium field. And so they are really kind of rebuilding their war chest and don't have funds to contribute to this right now. We will have better numbers, I believe, next week. And once we get that proposal, I will get a copy from Dawn and send it to everybody, because we certainly will be looking at it at capital budgets. We also know that Sherborne is very apprehensive about their ability to be able to get this approved at their town meeting. And I believe at one point they were thinking they would have to do an override for this, but I don't know if that's the final outcome but this would need to be approved in both Dover and Sherborne in order for it to be funded.
Robin, if it's 2 million and they have 300,000, so then it's now 1.7, and we split it between us and
Dover,
Sherburne.
right.
Oh, so wouldn't we be at like 850?
Yeah, so that's where we are. So we're now somewhere around somewhere between 830 and 850. I can't remember the number.
I think because that shock layer was going to add about that, that a significant amount that they asked them to add on at the last meeting, right?
So that you just haven't changed the number in that cell?
Right. I
Oh.
didn't find that out until this morning. Right?
Okay.
And since we don't have the final proposal, I thought I would just wait and just change it once.
Okay.
Robin, can I ask a process question with this? Just
Certainly.
How the town, so as I understand it, 12 years ago, the boosters donated the original field, the track and field, with the understanding that that the school would take on the replacement cost as it aged out. So we knew for 12 years, and now it's I guess the normal life was 10 years, and we've now gone past that. But do we usually sort of, anticipating a $2 million replacement cost, or maybe we didn't anticipate that much, but a major replacement cost, we don't budget anything for that along the way, or do we just sort of wait for it to?
No, we did budget for it. We knew this was coming. We were expecting just the turf replacement, and what we weren't expecting was this. I believe they're expanding and renovating the track as well.
I see. I was
So-
wondering why this was so surprising, this number.
Right. So, you know, all along, we were expecting somewhere between 500 and 750,000 just to replace the turf. Like, we always knew that that was going to be a cost that we would need to bear. And as a matter of fact, Dover, we have been anticipating this for a while, and we've been squirreling away some free cash to, you know, we were thinking that we would use that. But right now, based upon our current capital budget policy, we will most likely bond all items over $1 million. But now that this is less than $1 million, we'll have to go back through the numbers and see if it still makes sense for us to use debt or not. But this over here anticipates we will be using debt, and then we will be using some additional free cash to offset some of the overall cost for the budget for this year. But we felt that we needed to really begin this disciplined program of putting debt in place for some of these longer life assets. So.
And there's also been debate in the Capital Budget Committee over how we do our longer term planning for replacing all sorts of capital equipment. Historically, the town has just paid in the year that it came due and moved on. But setting up some reserves that might enable us to manage those capital replacements seem to be a very logical thing to do. And the town has started doing that, but we haven't really got to the point where we can use those funds to replace all the capital purchases that we have in front of us.
Right. So we're actually working. I'm working with the town finance staff to put together a debt waterfall schedule so that we understand exactly what our debt service is over the next 10 years, because what we should start seeing is some of the debt roll off, and then it gives us capacity for additional debt. But most importantly, we want to make sure that we can afford the debt service, because when you look at, you know, the next few years after this year, we have another 12 or $13 million of capital. And, you know, the question I always have is, does all of this need to really happen in this 4 and 5 year period? Can we push some of it out? Because by pushing it out, we'll start having debt roll off, and we'll be able to absorb some of that capacity. But in order to really understand that, we need this more robust debt waterfall schedule. And because we've never had debt before, we just don't have it. So we're working with our advisors to kind of help us pull it together and to better understand. You know, the bottom line is, all this capital does need to be replaced. I don't think any of this is a nice to have, but if you can't afford to replace it in the next 4 or 5 years, we need to just prioritize. I mean, that's all there is to it. And certainly going forward, we're going to plan better for the future.
Right. And I would add another point. Those numbers for projections for FY27 through 29 tend to be pretty spotty. And then our experience is that departments have a varied degrees of diligence in really thinking through what their capital expenses are. So this is probably a low watermark on those capital expenses going forward.
I think for the most part, you know, especially the building replacements, because they're using the on-site insight reports are
Right.
actually pretty good. I think where we've gotten blindsided is the fleet.
Yes, exactly.
Right, and that's why it's important to have these professional studies.
Robin, relate to that. Since things like the fire trucks takes 3 to 4 years to get delivered, is the study covering things like how climate change and things like that could require us to have more equipment than what we've experienced in the past?
So,
Or one might add, and potentially more expensive equipment. So moving to electric vehicles, for example, may in the short term be much more expensive than gas fueled vehicles.
But also just thinking about, we've been very lucky that we don't have big wildfire issues and things like that, but what else could be coming our way that we have to prepare for?
right, so, you know, I've never done one of these studies before, so we will defer to Mike and the fire department, but, you know, certainly we should ask the question, you know, should we be thinking about not just today, but 10 years from now? And you know, what I found with these kinds of studies, you need to keep updating them to make sure that you have the best and most relevant information. But that's a great question, and we can certainly pose it to the consultant.
And then the other question is some of the huge ticket items that I don't see is like are we done with the Carroll Community Center? Are we done with Hale? Are we done with the paddleball court
Right,
and the rail trail?
So Hale was a phenomenal outcome for the town. Hale Education Fund was able to raise all the money they needed to put covenant restrictions on the land privately. So they have entered into an agreement with trustees of reservations to have a CR on all of the land in Dover without the town having to contribute for that CR. The education portion of Hale, which was always going to be carved out, will still be run by Hale Education Fund. And there could potentially be some additional structures that will be put on those 250 acres, which are primarily in Westwood. They also carved out some of the land in Westwood, which will not have any CRs on it, but all of the land in Dover will have CRs on it, and it will be held by, the CR will be held by trustees. There were many families in Dover that helped the fundraising abilities of Hale. So it was a very, very good outcome for us. And right now the CR is with the Massachusetts, whatever the department is that looks at them to approve them. But it really is a win for the town. So all the land, you know, by Powasset Farm, by Noanet, all of that is going to have CRs on.
So it'll never be developed. It's going to kind of remain as is.
It's going to remain as passive recreation space, taken care of, basically stewarded by trustees of reservations.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
And the community center, I think Janet asked about that.
The community center, we are getting very close to completion. We're probably maybe 2 months away. There will be no more additional expense. Hopefully, we won't even have to borrow everything. We still have some of the contingency left over. I think it's close to $1 million, so we'll see where we end up there. Dave and I were lucky enough to get a tour of the building. It is really nice.
Nice.
I mean, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. I think as a community, we are really going to enjoy the space. They did a really good job making sure that the space could be used for lots of different types of programs. It's really, really nice.
Great.
And rail trail and paddleball court.
So the paddleball courts,
Pickleball or
Oh,
paddleball?
sorry,
yeah,
pickleball.
Oh, okay.
I think those
Paddle
are off
tennis.
the table.
Pickleball.
I haven't heard anything from Park and Rec on those.
My understanding was that Park and Rec is planning in the short term to share the tennis courts in some form to satisfy the need for pickleball.
Right,
they're
and they have
actually-
also turned the basketball court at Carroll Park into a pickleball court, which is
Yeah.
being used by the town. There is in fiscal year 27, the big ask for Park and Rec is $650,000 to replace or renovate the Carroll Park playgrounds. The rail trail is a project in and of itself. It's not part of capital budget. It is really in its infancy. The first information session was held last week. We had 125 people participate. They presented, how the project is different from the project that was presented and approved by town meetings 8 years ago. The idea here is to develop the entire rail bed between, and there would be connections to Medfield and Needham. All of the design work is going to be done through a grant that we received from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That grant will also give us the cost of development. And once we have all those numbers, there will be a special town meeting and the town will decide whether or not it's an expenditure that we want to incur. Because we're willing to connect, there is grant money available. Medfield was able to develop their rail trail quite cost effectively through the utilization of grants. There was some private donations and then utilizing their DPW to do some of the work. And we have talked to Medfield about potentially, because they bought a bunch of the equipment, maybe utilizing their DPW, it may be more cost effective for us to do some of the work. But it really is in its infancy, and I encourage everybody to, the website has all the information set up. The public hearing, the initial public hearing was recorded. It's on there. I encourage the community to get engaged, to understand what the value proposition is for the rail trail.
And I for one, have got to say, Robin, that was quite an impressive presentation. I was
Right.
pleasantly surprised at how thorough it was and how considered it was. And they had answers to many questions that residents faced. So I really encourage everybody to have a look at that presentation.
Yeah, and I also encourage people to sign up for alerts so you know what's going on. You know, this is a project for the community, so please engage.
Well, I'm also going to say I thought Robin's presentation this evening was great.
Yes,
And,
indeed.
Yes. So I thought you were saying, I agree.
A remarkable summary. It gives us a pretty good sense of where the capital requests are right now. It's with the reduction in the turf field costs, it looks like about 60% of the capital requests are taken up by the turf field, the fire engine, and
Exactly.
the fuel,
Right, the
fueling
fuel island.
fuel island. So those three kind of drive the expense. They're obviously all three have some kind of uncertainties about them. The turf field, I think, is primarily uncertain because it's not at all clear where Sherburne is going to come down. The fire truck, I doubt that the fire department's going to be willing to put it off, but that's a possibility. And the fuel island seems the most kind of time urgent and could get uh, uh, hung up for a variety of reasons, but that seems the one most likely to go through. Hopefully, all three are resolved. It doesn't appear to accomplish a lot for us to put these off, other than with the
Right.
fire engine potentially making a bad choice about which
Yeah.
engine we buy. If there's uncertainty there, it clearly makes sense to wait.
Okay.
But we'll have to see kind of what the chief says and how things stand. Any other questions about the capital budget?
The only two of those things would need to be funded through debt, only the fuel island and the engine, if it were approved, is that correct?
Right, so, you know, that's what our policy says, but I think, you know, we need to to look at our long-term needs and see if it makes sense. You know, we have never utilized debt, and I think we really, given the amount of capital we have, and the desire not to spike the tax rate, I think we need to think to really have a disciplined approach to debt. It's not, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing for things like this. So, you know, I want to go through that, excuse me, the debt waterfall and really understand what we can absorb under the tax levy with respect to debt service.
And from a
One
rating
other thing that's
perspective,
worth noticing is that while the capital requests for the next several years remain very high, the number of requests for more than $1 million actually drops off substantially. So
Exactly.
DPW continues to request $2.2 million each of the next 2 years, I think, but their biggest ticket item is about $600,000. So that may also influence kind of where we go with that.
Right.
Woody, when do we huddle as like just the warrant committee to kind of, discuss what we're actually going to recommend to the
So
board?
we end up having to vote as a group on each of the articles for our recommendation. And right now that is scheduled to happen after open hearing. So we'll end up voting at a meeting kind of after open hearing, get through as many as we can. And then we all need to write up the articles that were assigned. So that it's not, I think everybody's actually been assigned to articles. It's not a bad thing to start thinking about how you might convey
Right.
what the issues are in the articles. A lot of what we're trying to do, it's worth looking at last year's Blue Book. Not that there's that is so much better than any other year, but at least look back to last year and just look at what the write-ups consisted of. because the article is stated in the blue book, and then underneath it is an explainer, and we write the explainer.
So last year in the open hearing, I believe Mike made the presentation on the operating budget. Is that something you want us to do again?
I think that would be great if you'd be willing
Okay.
to.
So Mike, the
Kevin,
way that
the other thing is-
presentation was done last year, I think was really good. So, maybe next week we can work on that with
Absolutely.
the information we have, and then we'll get feedback in open hearing.
Right.
So, Kevin, I just wanted to add that one of the reasons we don't vote on it until after open hearing is that's our opportunity to hear feedback from the residents as to how they feel about these various issues, and that might influence us in the vote that we make.
Okay. And then it's just if the majority of the warrant committee feels that a warrant should that we would, get behind it, then it's conveyed to the Board of Selectmen that the warrant committee says yes, but is this like the Supreme Court where there's like dissenting opinions and stuff like that?
Sometimes there are.
Okay.
Yeah,
We have
if
the
people
ability
feel really
to
strongly about it.
vote in favor or opposed, or to split. Almost every time last year, I think we were unanimous, but there have been times when we have split, and we've tried to explain why we're split.
Right.
I think what's important is that we be clear about what has gone into our thinking.
Okay.
And we don't have any, we don't make any decisions in this, Kevin. We just make recommendations to town meeting. So
right, but like the board will know, like, okay, the warrant committee, by a vote of whatever, I don't even know how many there are, but like of 6-1 or something is recommending this warrant, and they would see why the one person, some thoughts on why they didn't want to.
That's part of the explainer. Part of the
Okay.
explainer is for you to write down how we voted and why.
Okay.
Did we make any progress on going electronic this year, or are we still doing exactly the same thing we did last year?
I have to talk to Michael about that tomorrow, actually. We're definitely not going electronic. We're not at that stage. The question is whether we can make some formatting changes, and that might.
I vote for 8.5 by 11 paper.
Yeah. Well,
I think we all do.
Definitely going to vote for that as well. I just admit that I had a little insomnia last night, having the blue book ready in time. So if doing 8.5 by 11 actually makes it easier, which I think it will, then I'm absolutely in favor of it. Okay, why don't we keep going? Michael, you're up next.
Okay, perfect. I will share my screen again. So I'm glad Robin went first, because after the year-over-year in capital, this should be a breeze for operating. I won't bury the lead. We're at 3.3%. So it's overall in a good direction. Just give me half a second here. Sorry, I have too many things open. Can you see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, and I zoomed it in for you, Kevin.
He's not the only one with failing eyes.
So I just thought I'd go through and highlight, you can see all the changes here, but I thought I'd go and highlight some of the changes or things that might be considered a little bit above level service. So first here in the selectmen's budget, in salaries, the salaries include a new position of a management analyst and communication assistant. So, as you know, or you may recall, in prior years, we've eliminated a couple things from our budget. One was a municipal project manager. Another was an IT position. They were actually both cut last year. So despite those cuts, the work wasn't cut, right? The work remains. So we're really in dire need of some additional assistance, specifically because, as Woody just mentioned, we're hearing from the Warrant Committee, ZBA, Capital, Town Report, Sustainability Committee in terms of grants that they're looking for staff assistance, and we just don't have that bandwidth or that capability. Bob, when I first started, used to tell me we don't have a bench. So we don't have anybody to bring up to the plate to pinch hit. So this includes a management analyst position within that. I'll just keep kind of scrolling down. You see no big changes. Warrant Committee, Town Accountant, Assessor, Treasurer Collector, you will see a jump in the salary. I'm very pleased to report that Monday we had our new full-time permanent Treasurer Collector start, which we're all very, very excited about. Also exciting, but it comes at a cost. She is a very experienced Treasurer Collector. So really good news operationally, but it does drive a higher end of the pay scale. So you will see an increase there in salary. A small increase in expenses, which is, again, level service, but just increases in some bank and billing fees, our payroll processing and processing a tax title. Relatively small, but increase in law. But again, that's just to reflect actuals. There's no additional service there. You will see in IT, as I mentioned, we no longer have a salary because we cut that position. You will see a very large increase in expenses. We're hoping this is a placeholder. So as Warrant Committee, I think, is aware, there's been a very multi-year, well before I was here, push to go to online permitting for all our land use and inspectional departments. We have applied for a grant. We've applied for a $148,000 grant from the state, which we feel pretty confident that we will receive the grant. There is some question if we'll receive the whole amount or not. It's a very competitive grant. My understanding is had a significant number of asks, well over what is allocated to be spent. So while we're confident we'll receive a grant, we are questioning if it may not be the full amount. But the need was so great for this permitting software. The selectmen were greatly encouraged by the various land use board and committees to include this in the budget in the event we don't get the grant. They wanted to fund this regardless whether we got the grant or not. So in an ideal world, we will be able to back out of this number up to $148,000. And we should know this month, so it'll be before town meeting. But that's why that is such a jump. We hope this is temporary.
And it will be a one-time cost.
So portion of it, right? So right. A portion of it is a one-time cost, and the implementation is quite expensive. There'll then be an annual recurring cost just for the software going forward. The other amount there is just some increases because we don't have an IT position. We outsource our IT, and there were some small increases in our new contract that we signed for the coming fiscal year.
Michael, is there like a huge lift to convert all the paper records to then the online format, or is that part of the grant?
So some of that's part of the implementation. So what this grant will allow us to do is, pick a day zero that we start online permitting. So all the paper would still exist here, but going forward, it would all be online. However, there are opportunities going forward that we can, in an ideal world, whether it's staff or there's other grant opportunities, to go backwards. So we could take those paper data and upload it into the permitting system. So we do have the historical data, but we separated those into two separate things just because the cost got very high. So we'll do the permitting first, and then we do hope to go backwards in time. That's a really good question, because part of the online permitting is, yes, to make it easier. I've worked in communities. I tell you, the best thing for the public, they love to see what their neighbors are up to, so they can go and look what their building permits for. But also the historical data is really, really helpful. So we do hope to get that up there. So town clerk, no major changes. You will see a jump in elections and registration expenses. And that's related to, we anticipate multiple special town meetings next year. So we already have next fiscal year. So later this calendar year, we already have two potential ones on the book for MBTA communities. As you know, we're discussing the rail trail. We're also in discussions with Aquarian at the potentiality of an interconnection with the Dedham Westwood Water District would result in Dover becoming an MWRA community, which will require a town meeting. So, I hope things kind of flesh out a little differently, but we could be looking at 4 special town meetings in the next calendar year or the next fiscal year. So you'll see some additional expenses there to account for that. Another thing I just want to mention, it's not actually built into this budget now, but we do intend to, and that the selectmen have brought forward the concept of providing a stipend for the town clerk for these additional special town meetings and special elections. Felicia, her salary doesn't encompass all the extra work those entail. So we're working with town council, working with the personnel board to look at adding some ability to add those stipends. And then I think it'll be a policy conversation perhaps with the warrant committee of whether or not we incorporate that into the budget, not knowing what that final number would look like, or is that something we might consider dipping into the reserves for, once we know there's an actual cost and we need to pay out those stipends. So just something to keep in mind.
Michael, for the special town meetings, is there any opportunity for us to try and combine them together so we have fewer of them?
So the easy answer is yes, you certainly could do that. However, the town moderator has generally expressed an interest in not doing that, in the hopes, because some of these, they really drive attendance, but for kind of specific issues, and you also risk not finishing in one night. So the concept was kind of spreading those out, but that's certainly up for discussion. Yes, we certainly could look to do that. I appreciate that question.
Right. So like this year, we have placeholders for 2 MBTA Community Act meeting because we have to be compliant. And if we're not successful the first time, we need to do a second meeting. So we have the first meeting September 29th, and then we have a placeholder for another meeting in November.
Right.
And it's really important to have those as standalone meetings.
So, with Conservation Commission, you will see some additional expenses. I just lost my screen. Can you still see the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. You went blank for a minute. You will see some additional expenses there. They've requested some one-time money for some additional admin help to get them caught up. We have brought in someone to help various boards and committees that are behind on minutes. And some other regulatory requirements. The Conservation Commission has taken advantage of that, but they've hit a ceiling in their expenses. So they've asked for some additional funding for next year to finish that catch up. I know planning was in before, but I don't think they touched on their budget at all, but there's no real reason to, not too much changing there. Same with Board of Appeals, Whiting Road, townhouse expenses. The community center, there's a lot of conversation on this. We really have no idea what the expenses are going to be. So in an effort to not artificially drive up this year's budget, we have left this at level funded, but just to make the warrant committee aware, this very easily could be an item that goes over and we may need to come back to you at the end of the year for a transfer, but we felt it was prudent at this time to maintain that, given that we just don't know what that's going to look like.
Michael, the original request for the community center was for 2 maintenance people, if I recall.
Yeah, so in the original request, actually for this line 193 was for a community center director. The salaries for the maintenance position is within the building maintenance department.
Okay.
Because although that person would work, or focus on the community center, they'd be available to all town buildings.
Okay.
So that's what's reflected here, and it was already built in last year. We had worked in I believe it was a half-year position because we knew the building wouldn't be open, and it's still not, although it's coming soon. You will see expenses here jumping under building maintenance, and that is also specifically related to the community center and some additional equipment that's needed for the gym floors and some of the larger some of the machines that are needed to clean the floors there. So they're not quite capital items, but that will be a temporary 1-year jump in some expenses. And then you'll see the total general government here in yellow. I just kind of grayed out. I won't rehash. You've already talked to police, fire, and ambulance, so I won't do that again tonight. Building inspector, again, is pretty straightforward. There's some additional costs for some training and membership, but again, it's level service. Just some of those expenses have gone up. So that's why you see some additional money here. Animal control, you've done. Protective agency, you've done the schools. You'll see this is an actual number now for Minuteman Vocational. So that's a strong number. This other vocational is Norfolk Agriculture. That's just a placeholder right now, but we believe that's pretty close to accurate. Again, DPW is in, so I won't hit all of their items. So Board of Health, you'll see a pretty big jump in salaries, but an almost, not quite, but a significant decrease in expenses. This reflects the new part-time nurse. So moving the contractual expenses up into salaries, which offset some of that. You'll see Council on Aging, and I do know that Janet is here. So if there are questions when we have a chance for questions, or you certainly interrupt us, we could move her in and she'd be happy to answer. But what you're seeing here in salaries is a couple different moving pieces. So one is additional hours for their existing part-time staff, and then also a new part-time position. So these are new asks, but and Janet, I'm sure, can explain more if you have questions, but it's really close to level service only because their service demand has risen. And so in order for them to continue to provide the services they really need those additional hours to do that. So that's why you do see a jump here in salaries. Again, no changes in our veterans agent. We work with the veterans agent in Natick, who performs our obligated services. I believe libraries coming in later. You've already talked to Parks and Rec. No increase in historical. And then you get down to our insurances. These numbers are still placeholders. As numbers come in, health insurance actually, you'll see a small decrease. We feel that is pretty firm at this point. But our other property and workers' comp insurance, we are still waiting for final numbers. Our Norfolk County retirement is a solid number. You'll see a very small decrease. And again, as I mentioned earlier, not to bury the lead, it was 3.3% is the overall operating budget increase currently as proposed.
So Mike, if you get a grant of 100,000, what does it do? Can you just?
3.1.
Okay.
My hope is it would be, maybe we could get to 3 because I hope it would be just a bit,
Right.
even if it's only partially funded, it would be a bit
Right.
over.
Right.
So any questions from me, or again, if it's on the COA positions, I'd be happy to, or recommend we move Janet in.
This is a great summary. I mean, we should just put in a few slides exactly what you said. And I almost feel like at open hearing, it would be helpful to go over this for people to see everything.
Sure.
Questions for Michael?
Michael, what is the total head count?
I do
Out of
not have
curiosity.
my FTE handy, but I will get that for you and I can send you an email.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Janet, question on COA. Are we seeing more elder population in town, or just more participation, or what's driving more demand for service?
I think you're seeing both. We're seeing that the population has increased, that there's, as of the end of December, there's about 1,567 people residents in Dover that are over the age 60 and over. And we're seeing an increase in people accessing our services, including the outreach services, that people are aging, their health is changing, and so they're reaching out for some support in trying to figure out what the resources are, maybe set up home care. Some are going through surgeries and they're trying to understand what are my options. Yeah, so it's gotten a lot busier, Janet.
So you start counting that population at age 60?
Yes, that we actually, if somebody's 55 and reaching out to us, of course, we're going to talk to them, Kevin, and we're trying to support children that are caring for their parents who are age 60 or over as well. So the other pieces that the COA does is that we are also manage the senior property tax work-off program for the town. So we help seniors connect with different departments so that they can gather some hours and get abatements on their property taxes. And then in the past couple of years ago, I think during the pandemic, it shifted where the Council on Aging is now the financial and energy assistance coordinator for all town residents. So I will tell you, in the past 2 months, this past month especially, we're getting a lot of calls from residents asking for help with fuel assistance. And that's what we're here for.
Okay.
And I've noticed that you also have taken a lot of opportunities to do things with other towns and other COAs as far as, having events that Dover does and Needham will do and people can cross-register. Is that a trend that's increasing or?
I think so. We're seeing a lot of people from other communities come. What's nice is that for all of the COAs, they welcome other towns. What happens, the other town residents that are seniors, what happens is as our programs become more in demand, and Dover's just starting to see this, we're having to add a timeline where Dover residents get first priority to register for programs. Because otherwise it would fill up so quickly, so many of the Dover residents could be excluded. We partner with Westwood for day trips and overnight trips. I'm talking to Sherburne and Medfield and Wellesley and Natick and Needham and Walpole regarding the programs they offer. A lot of times when somebody's saying, I'm looking for a Qigong class, but why don't you offer one? And I'll say, well, here's what we have, but Needham has one and Walpole has one and Sherburne has one. So we're trying to make sure people know the resources are out there for them to connect to and support them in that way, Marty.
Janet, do you have any sense about the increase in demand for services that may be consequential to the community centre opening?
I'm really curious how this is all going to play out, Cam. I think that for us, if by adding this additional part-time position of another outreach coordinator, it could fill in the hours where the other outreach coordinator is not available. So it would give us full coverage during the week. And I think that's the need and the demand that we see coming in, is that people are reaching out for more help in their caregiving situations or their home situations. I think with the community center, people hopefully it will increase awareness of who we are and all the things that we can do. Our board of directors is working hard to talk more about the outreach services that we offer because they feel those are kind of the silent programs we offer versus come to a lecture or come to a fitness class or come to a luncheon. So this new position would really help us look at, for many of the seniors, that they're aging in place. They can't afford to move to another housing out there, and housing is limited. And for many times, if they need a low-income housing location, the waiting list is 3 to 4 years for that. So we're working with families now, I think, and trying to help them age in place and access resources in an affordable manner. I think the new community center will hopefully help us be a hub for that for the whole community.
Michael, I have a question for you about the operating budget. pretty astonishing that we came in with such a small increase this year. But
Well,
if
that's me being resourceful, Woody.
Well, but,
Part of it is, oh, go ahead, ask your question.
but this is for Michael in general about the operating budget. It seems likely that we're under-resourced at the townhouse. That if we and ZBA and a variety of other committees are asking for more support, can, it seems there's going to be a lot of pressure for increased staffing at the townhouse. Is that reasonable? And if so, what do you project for the operating budget for the next several years? I mean, obviously, our capital budget is going to be an issue for the next 5 years, if not longer. But are we also pressed on the operating side?
No, I appreciate that question. And I think, part of what we're dealing with is not truly understanding all of the capabilities of our departments because we have not been fully staffed. So I think, as you know, our treasurer collector, our accounting department, having them get up to speed, I think we'll have a better sense of the resources that may or may not be needed for those departments. I do think that what I see is the biggest needs is one, in addition to capital, it's been documented that DPW does need some additional labor staff. So I see that request coming over the next couple of years. And then, as we talked about, we are proposing a position here to help with some of these board and committee requests. But I'm very fearful that on day one, if this gets approved, that person's already swamped. So we don't know what that's going to look like because we are seeing that push from more and more committees, which I very much understand. We appreciate, particularly this committee, the volunteer hours you put in, but most people now are very willing to step up and help, but they're not looking for a part-time job by volunteering on committee. And oftentimes that seems to be what it does turn into when they're, especially the committees that are not staffed. I do think we'll see that. What that exactly looks like, I don't know. I think this position is a really good first step. But I appreciate you acknowledging, we could be back because this one position perhaps doesn't satisfy the demand, but we just don't.
Michael, one other position I thought we might need to consider is to try and get a professional grant seeker, because the opportunities for getting grants are hard to find if you're just an amateur. And it would be great if we could have somebody who really knows the grant landscape across the various needs that we have, whether it be DPW or who knows, Conservation Commission and so on. If we could sort of start considering something along those lines, because I think that would relieve a lot of departments of a lot of challenges.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I appreciate that. I could really see the benefits of such a position.
Michael.
Sorry, Simone.
Sorry. I'm trying to wrap my head around like how the town operates. And I've been struggling to say, like, if anyone stopped me in the middle of the road today and asked me, like, what are the top 3 priorities of the town of Dover? I absolutely have no clue. And I think it's difficult to come up with an answer about like headcount, as Woody was raising, because it's like, at least in my head, it's difficult to see where we would put the efforts or the resources if we wanted to make Dover be, like the perfect town. And the reason I'm saying this is because I went through an experience today in Medfield that I thought it was interesting to, it's a very different, like, it's not fair to compare Dover and Medfield and this specific point, because I was there because I'm trying to lease a space there. And here we don't have like commercial space available to lease and so forth. But having said that, today, if I want to lease this space in Medfield, it would take easily 3 months to get it approved. by the Board of Assessors there. And in my head, I was like, okay, so, the guy who is willing to rent the space to me will not wait 3 months to see if the Board of Assessors will approve. So I start, and I met with the planning, the fire department, and the building commissioner there, all at the same time. They were phenomenal. Like, it was really a great meeting. But I'm trying to apply this to Dover. It's like, if you were to build the perfect town, to make sure that, we don't wait 3 months to get someone to come to Dover and invest in the town, where would you put your money? Or, like, what are these top 3 priorities?
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. So I guess I'll try to address that a few different ways. So one is, day to day, we have regulatory responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So, different departments carry out services that we're required to carry out either by local or state law.
Mm-hmm.
So that really takes up, I would easily say, the majority of department time is just what we're required to do and the things we're required to accomplish. We experience some of what you are feeling in Medfield, which is some things people feel take longer than they wish. So you're right, we don't have a lot of business space to rent out, but we do have homeowners that would like to do new pools or additions or garages. And sometimes we do get feedback that it can be a frustrating experience because they don't know where to go, where to start. They may get bounced around from departments. So we're doing a few things to address that. The biggest priority, I think we just talked about, is the online permitting. So right now, when you come in, you have to bring paper and all sorts of different applications, and it can be very frustrating. So now you can apply for all the things from home. The other thing that we would consider is Dover is a very flat structure. So we have independent elected boards and committees. They're involved in a lot of the things that you probably deal with Medfield. So we have an elected Board of Assessors. We have an elected planning board. We have an elected Board of Health. So those staff, we all work really well together, but from a technical perspective, they all report to different bosses, have different goals and priorities. So I'm not suggesting we change the structure of Dover's government tomorrow, but looking at how we might be able to better work together, other opportunities for, even if it's not a formal change of government, to have all those departments report to one spot informally. Not dissimilar to, for example, we now have a true DPW because we signed agreements with Parks and Rec and Cemetery that their staff now report through DPW. A lot of towns have what's called a land use director who kind of oversees and coordinates. So that's someone you go meet with, and they could, for lack of a better word, hold your hand through the process to make it go as smoothly as possible. The other piece, and I'll see if I can share my screen here. So in addition to, big picture regulatory, obviously just serving the public in the best way we can are huge priorities. But each year, the Board of Selectmen, can you see that spreadsheet now?
Yep.
Yeah, so they adopt goals and priorities for each fiscal year. So this is something that's generally drafted by the selectmen, and then it gets sent out to all boards and committees and staff to look at and weigh in on. And these, are kind of broken down to different priority areas, different focus areas. And so year to year, we're looking on what are the things that are best going to improve the quality of life in Dover, kind of the best bang for our buck. And again, reoccurring theme, but you'll see online permitting, a lot to do with communication, because that's really been huge feedback. We talked about treasurer and accounting operations because we've not been fully staffed. Looking at hiring and succession planning, and then you'll see a number of special projects. So obviously finishing the community center, we're really excited to be kicking off our municipal aggregation program, the rail trail. So each year, this is really what we try to focus on in addition to kind of the day-to-day responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Thank you. I think this is helpful. I feel like I was listening to Janet and hearing all these stories that I heard in Dover in the last 6 years that I've been here of, you hear a lot about kids getting everything. And then there's the Council of Aging, and are they getting enough? And then there's in between this big adult population that I don't know what we get. You kind of like navigate in some of opportunities. So and this I'm not talking about just like recreations and programs. I'm just talking in the overall engagement in the town hall. So, I recently I became aware of, like, there's one of the citizen petitions, and I became aware that last year there was significant disappointment with the outcome of the town hall in regards to a citizen petition there, and it was mainly because these people could not be at the town meeting to participate. They felt that they didn't have their voices heard. But so I'm just trying to see if we can collectively come with ideas where we understand those issues that we have in Dover, and we are giving attention also to people who might not be represented necessarily at a town meeting, but are important enough that at one point they will not become a burden to what we are trying to build, right? Because like, I think that the worst that we can get is that when people start actually saying no to everything and criticizing everything that we are trying to do, because eventually we are focusing on a group of 173 individuals that were at the town meeting, or whatever magical number that we have, and forgetting 5,800 people that are in the town. Like what I mean is like finding this balance and communicating the priorities become even a bigger challenge for us. And I appreciate, I really like how you describe the whole thing, and I appreciate the access to the information. I think like internally with myself, I need to see like how I can better contribute to these discussions, but collectively, we also, I would love to actually see more discussions like this happening to how we make it a stronger community in Dover.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. Some of the feedback we hear is it's difficult for busy people to participate, right? So whether it's work, whether it's kids and families, it's hard to come to town meeting. It's hard to attend meetings like this. I mean, right now we have 0 attendees, even though I think this is really exciting stuff. Nobody's here at 8:30 watching it. I think that is one benefit. We have found that using Zoom has increased our participation because you don't have to drive to the townhouse, sit in a meeting and worry about, getting kids ready or making dinner and things like that. So we are hopeful this can continue. Just for the warrant committee's benefit, the remote meeting law that allows us to do what we're doing right now actually expires the end of this month. And there are a number of efforts to extend that. So we are hopeful that happens. Because again,
I heard that also in Medfield today.
Yeah. And I will say this is not uncommon. Unfortunately, since this was first implemented, when COVID started, and each time they've come right up to the deadline and extended it. So this is not a surprise, but we were hoping maybe not to be in the same situation again, and perhaps they'll just make it permanent. But I think continuing efforts like this, we are just about to finish and release our updated communications study and plan. So again, trying to, as you said, trying to reach those people who are just not the obvious targets, because you're not wrong. It's often an older population at town meeting, or it is issue driven, right? So if there's a school issue, all the parents show up, but then we never see them again until the next school issue at a town meeting. So it is hard to keep people engaged, but we really want to try hard to do that. I took down the screen, but one of the things on the goals this year was Board of Selectmen office hours. So, again, trying to just give opportunities for people that maybe they don't walk in and want to find someone to talk to, but if we advertise, hey, we're going to be here, the selectmen will be here, able to talk, bring up your issues and concerns, and just trying to stress that, we are always available. I try to be good. I'm pretty behind right now on emails, but I try to be good about responding or meeting with people. So, but I really do appreciate what you're saying, and we'll continue to try to target those people who are kind of missing in the middle sometimes.
Excuse me, Mike, may I jump in for 1 sec?
Oh, please.
So from the selectman standpoint, when we're doing our goal setting, we have to make sure that the warrant committee is part of that process, or a better part of that process. But generally, what it came down to is some recent boards of selectmen were really focusing on government efficiency. And what we wanted to turn to this year is give the town some deliverables. And one would be online permitting. I don't know if you've ever tried to put in something as simple as a pool. But after you get through the 27 land use committees and everyone's going like this, it's very frustrating as a process. In addition, it's very frustrating and very inefficient from our town staff who are trying to implement all of our rules and regulations. So that one to us was extremely important, because the benefits to the public and to the town, it just becomes a win-win. Another one, municipal aggregation, as Mike mentioned, electric aggregation, and be able to bring to the town an option to lower their electricity costs. I mean, it's a no-brainer. The other thing I just want to put in a plug, I don't know where you're all thinking, but in terms of the townhouse staff, I'll say Mike's side of the townhouse, if that makes sense. That wing has been grossly understaffed for years, and we've got to stop it because we've dodged some bullets. Losing temporarily our AAA rating is the one that comes to mind. We have got to have the proper staff to meet the needs of the people. And you know, Mike got extremely creative by making Chris the director of finance, and he's working with Carl. And so Chris's wedge is going to go up and Carl's wedge is going to go down. The town is spending a significant amount on consultants because we don't have the employees to do this work. So I mean, it's an absolute priority in my mind that until we give Mike the proper staff to meet the needs of the town, we're not meeting the needs of the town, and we could have major holes develop, and we just can't afford that. We joke about it all the time. What we're really looking for is 12 to 18 months of dull and boring. If we can get that, we're in good shape. So again, from a priority standpoint, what we wanted to do was look at things that we could deliver to the town this year that would give everyone a benefit, and hopefully save or allow people to save money on their electric. So I don't know if that helps, but
no, absolutely, absolutely. Like I really appreciate the comments and the kind of like educational session. It's very hard for me as a first time warrant committee, kind of like understanding everything. And you know, if any, I will always ask questions, so I'm not going to even apologize. I think they're wonderful. I'm known wherever I worked before for asking questions, but it's like I feel like we really need to get this straight and understand where we are heading to.
So, Mike, when the selectmen next year are doing our goal setting, and we come up with that first draft, those first drafts go to the warrant committee as well? I know they go to the.
Yep, so they go to all boards and committees, yep.
So that would be when, you know, a perfect time to have that conversation, and go from there.
Great, thank you.
So I can't help but comment that, having attended a few planning board meetings recently, I'm actually somewhat ambivalent about more participants in warrant committee meetings. It's been very peaceful this year.
Those planning board meetings are unbelievable. Yeah.
All right, to move us along, I see Bethany's already here, and I assume Rob will be on relatively shortly. Before we go to the library, though, I wanted to grab 5 minutes while Michael's on to kind of ask people's opinion about the Blue Book, and changing the format of the Blue Book and whether anyone would have objections to a Blue Book that is 8.5 by 11 as opposed to the current kind of a small booklet that we have. The reason to make this change is that it turns out, as I've been discovering the details of the Blue Book in the last 24 hours, that it's substantially more complicated for the printer to produce the current small booklet, therefore somewhat more expensive, although in the greater scheme of the budget, I think the $9,000 we spend on printing costs as a warrant committee are probably not the major driver of our budget. But it's substantially, it would be cheaper, but it would also be substantially easier in terms of formatting for the people preparing the Blue Book. So I think there are those advantages. The disadvantage is the convenience factor of the little Blue Book for that people have a relatively easy time carrying around, tossing on the ground at the post office, whatever they do with it. But it's relatively convenient to have the book and people are familiar with the format. So I just wanted to get a sense whether anybody has strong feelings one way or another about the booklet format versus an 8.5 by 11 format.
Question.
Yeah.
Is there any cost differential for blue versus just plain white?
I don't actually know the answer. I'm supposed to talk to the printer tomorrow, but and I was going to ask that. One possibility would be just to produce a front sheet that's blue and a back sheet that's blue and print the rest of the document in black and white, if there is a cost difference.
Woody, if I could just jump in, Jay, that's a really good question. And to Woody's point, we don't know. But the other thing we thought about was so the feedback we get is one is the size. And just for comparison, last year was the first year we printed the warrant on 8.5 by 11, and we got very positive feedback. So if that helps the warrant committee, people appreciated that going from half sheet to full sheet. The other thing is people find the blue book difficult to read with the black on blue printing. So to Woody's point, our suggestion would be to continue to print it in the blue cover, because I don't know what we do if we couldn't call it a blue book anymore. It would throw us all off. So we could still call it a blue book, but the internal pages would be white. Even if it was cost neutral, we still think it would be much easier for people to read.
Or we can just
Remember that the cherry sheets are no longer cherry colored.
That is true.
We can just put a title Blue Book in blue and then just have one.
Well, Dover had
It's like a psychological test. You say blue, but it's in white, and ask people to get the blue.
Well, I vote for the larger format. I think it will make a big difference. And those ideas about color, I think, are also really good.
I also vote for that. And if people who complain, just tell them to fold, and then it becomes like this.
No difference in postage. I don't know if does that matter, or it's going to be the same, or I don't know.
That's a great question. I'm not sure. It'd be this. I don't think the weight would change. I don't know if the size is anything for the postage. So we can find out.
But can you fold it and mail?
Yeah, that's a great question. Woody, maybe that's some questions for the printer. Yeah.
Yep.
You can just put a little sticker to fold in half.
So it sounds like that nobody has a major objection to using a larger format if we can go with it. All right, that's great.
I hope that in my lifetime we see an electronic version of the Blue Book.
Yeah. All right. I mean, this leaves aside the issue of having an online version, but which hopefully is a project for this coming year. But at least this year we can go to the larger format and go that way. So Rob and Bethany are here representing the library. I assume that most of you know who they are. The floor is yours. So if you have something you want to share, that it should be set up for you to share. Who's going
Thank you.
first?
I'm just so hi, everyone. For those of wow, it's so nice to see so many familiar faces.
I was going to say
Those-
everybody's unfamiliar to you, aren't they?
As some of you know, I used to be on Warrant Committee, so really thank you so much for the work that you're doing. It's very important. I'm going to actually let Bethany do most of the speaking tonight, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a highlight of a few items that the trustees wanted to share with you from the library about the budget. That she may also repeat, but it's important information. The first is to keep state accreditation, the library must spend 15% of the total budget for circulated materials. So that budget item line is kind of set for us. We can always go higher. We don't typically, but because we're mindful of the taxpayer dollars, but in order to keep state accreditation, we have to keep that line item at 15%. It's also important for folks on the warrant committee to understand that we use about $780,000 of non-municipal, so non-Dover taxpayer funds to support our budget. So we work really hard to use state grants, to use fundraising and endowments to supplement our budget to make it less of a the point isn't to make it less of a burden of the taxpayer, but it really is in the context of this to make it less of a burden of the taxpayer. The town and the library share the kind of physical plant. So the library budget is the paint in, and the town and DPW and other folks in buildings takes care of the budget from the kind of paint outward, and we work really well and coordinated with Carl to manage those capital expenses. But we also use non-municipal fund for other capital projects. So for example, this past year, we used about $40,000 of non-municipal funds to pay for study pods that will be coming to the library this year. Also, all of the programming that takes place at the library is the funding source for that is from the Friends of the Dover Library. So they raise between $30,000 and $50,000 a year, and that pays for all of the library programming. So that's not a taxpayer burden. And the citizens of Dover get some really robust programming. On average, we have about 25 to 30 programs a month. 370 programs in the last year with a budget of less than $30,000. So they do a lot with a little, and really, I think, give a lot to the community because of that. That's kind of from a budget perspective, that's all I wanted to kind of highlight for you before I turn it over to Bethany to go over kind of the budget and the kind of what the budget is this year. But I'm proud that we're still under $1 million for our total budget. That probably won't be the case next year, as the most of it is salaries. But we work really hard. The trustees work really hard to make sure that it's a really public-private partnership in terms of the budget of the library. We want the taxpayer to have some skin in the game because it's definitely a wonderful service to the community, but we also have some wonderful other resources to be able to tap into to make sure that our budget is robust and to provide really nice services for the community. And then now I'll let you go, Bethany.
All right. Hi, everyone. It is really great to see you all tonight. Thank you again. I want to echo Rob. The work the Warrant Committee does is so big. It is a really massive undertaking, especially as you're trying to look at all of these different units of the town and the different ways that they operate. So please, at any time, if you have questions about why things may work the way they do in the library budget, I would love to hear your questions and be able to talk through those. I also want to say today was an early release day at the library. On a typical day, we generally see about 220 people coming through the library. And that's over the course of about 10 hours. And today we had 226 between the hours of 11 and 12 p.m. It was huge. When I left today, we were well over 500 people in the building by the time I left, and I'm not sure what it was by the time we closed. It is a busy place. There is so much going on. And with our strategic plan, which we approved just about this time last year, we have even stronger goals. I'm sorry, hold on. I've got cats who would rather be let out. We have goals that we're really actively working towards. So as Rob said, one of them is the study pods, which I keep going back to nudge our vendor because they should be here very soon. So that there can be quiet space even when there are 226 fifth graders in the building. It was
wow.
And then working toward increased programming, particularly for adults who have really been asking for more for them. And we have a number of initiatives coming up. I do want to very quickly share a very quick summary of how our budget plays out. I'm going to get this set up. Share the screen and cross my fingers that it works, because I have not shared a screen on Zoom since probably 2021. So I'm going to do my best. There we go. All right, can you see that?
Success.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. All righty. So this is a really quick snapshot of the budget request that we handed in for FY26. And as Rob said, you can really see it's mostly salaries. The vast majority of our budget is being moved forward by salaries, market rate adjustments, and the class and comp plan. Circulating materials is set there. You can see it 15%. That is the minimum threshold for state certification. We need to spend at least 15% of our total municipal appropriations on materials for patron use. And then utilities and supplies make up the next biggest chunk. So that's electric, gas, water, phone, pens and pencils and paper for the office. There is, as you know, not a lot we can do about the utility prices. And there is a lot of unknown in our budget for next year because, fingers crossed, we really will have a fully electric HVAC system sometime next year. I have no idea what this is going to do to our electric budget. I don't know how comparable it will be to oil. I will say oil was hefty this year. I think we're still in budget. There have been some problems in Vadar with our budget not updating for the last month. So I'm not 100% sure where we are, but it's been a lot. So this is what our operating budget from the town looks like. And then, there we go. These are our ex-municipal funds. More than half, just tiny bit more than half goes toward programming. So this is craft supplies that show up at the makerspace. It's the activities that are in super awesome fun time. It's hiring performers to lead lectures and animal demonstrations and the whole shebang. Anything that shows up on our events calendar shows up in that budget line. Museum passes, another big service that we are able to provide. That also comes from the Friends. That's about 10% of what we spend from our ex-municipal budget. Hospitality, the coffee, the hot cocoa, the mints at the door, the things that we're able to give away and make people really feel like it's a welcoming space where they can settle in and spend some time. Staff use tends to be technology and software, especially software that maybe we're demoing for a year to see how it's going to work out and whether it's worth putting into the municipal budget. And then the big picture, this is how, oh, sorry, there's one more. This is what our funding sources look like. Generally, friends and donations were around 35 to 50,000. It really depends on the year. State aid which has a multitude of factors, including how robustly we share with other libraries in the network, the population, and a few other factors. State aid, we're anticipating around 16,000 for this year. Next year, certainly we hope it's level funded. We have been getting some increases in the last few years. The state budget, we're going to find out. We're going to find out what the FY26 state budget ends up looking like. And Dave Haviland will know more about the next piece, the interest on our trusts and endowments. Last year, we were able to get about 8,000 in that interest, which is not a lot on about $600,000 of endowed funds, but we're working there. And then the grants is generally cultural council grants, so a little extra support for our programming. And the last piece of the big picture, municipal budget is still a huge, huge motivating factor of what we're able to do. Friends and gifts for all of the wonderful programming and support that it provides. It's still just making sure that that gap is plugged. So that's all I've got. I will stop presenting now. Come on, stop screen share. There we go. So I guess I really want to open up first to all of you. Have you had a chance to look through the numbers that we've presented? Do you have any questions about particular budget lines? Rob and I went through this in the fall. There's not a lot that is discretionary in our spending. A lot of it's really dictated by class and comp, by utilities prices, and then we really try to be mindful of what we're spending on the things we do have control over, like the office supplies or, yeah, actually office supplies is one of the few things we've got a lot of discretionary spending there. But yeah, do you have any questions for me before? I don't know if there's even much to talk about. You're gonna let me know.
Bethany, thank you for the presentation. I don't have a question. It's more like a curiosity. I think in the last 3 years, I've been using the library more than I ever had used a library in my entire life. So I really appreciate what you guys do here. But it's really important to me, became even more important to me because I understood the kind of like safe haven that a library can be in so many different ways. Have you seen an increase in people looking to spend more time in the library and find like a safe place to be?
That's a really interesting question. And we are definitely seeing an uptick in foot traffic for this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year. Every month so far in this fiscal year, we have had more people in the building each month than the year before. Our circulation is not rising in the same direction. It's not rising at the same magnitude. So yes, I think that question is true. I think people are looking for a place to be that is welcoming, that they can come, they can hang out, they can take advantage of the different services we have and not feel obligated to, I don't know, to even have any obligations there. You don't have to spend anything. You could just sit there and do nothing and we would not mind at all.
I've got to give you a shout out, and that is during the heat wave when the library opened itself up to allow residents just to go and cool off. I thought was absolutely exemplary in leadership for the town. So well done.
And a risk. It was a risk because our AC is on its last legs. But it worked that day. It worked.
It worked that day. Well, hopefully you'll get your second floor approved this year's budget, and then you'll all be on splits and back ready to rock.
Simone, to answer, to talk a little bit more about your question, I think the trustees are almost at every meeting are thinking about how the community center is going to impact the traffic at the library once it opens. And we're very curious how that's going to what the relationship and dynamic will be, and how that will impact the town. I mean, today, I mean, my kids happen to be in 5th grade, so they were part of the entire. It was the entire 5th grade that was in the library today. It was kind of spectacular, and the librarians were very patient, and the teen tween librarian Toby is amazing. He just like stepped out and was like, maybe you should go play frisbee right now. Here's some frisbees. And all of a sudden it became a library again and not a rec center. So we as the trustees, as the governing body, are constantly thinking about when the community center comes online, how that will shift the library and what it means to be in a small town, and in terms of how community members will use it, because there are, you know, when the young kids are in there, when they should really be in a rec center, it does make it challenging for kind of our seniors who go into the library to actually like be in a library, not to be in a rec center. So we're really grateful to the library staff for kind of being more than just a library right now, and excited for what that will mean for the community. And I know the librarians are already thinking about like how to connect with the community center, and they're like already thinking about like the synergy between the two spaces, which is really exciting. We're really, I mean, if you come to a library uh, trustees meeting, like, you know, we think that Bethany and the library staff are kind of like over the top exemplary in terms of their ability to understand the community and what our needs are, as evidence to the fact that we spend very little money on programming, yet we have so many people coming to our programs. They really get the town, and I think that they'll be able to pivot really quickly if all of a sudden the foot traffic changes because people are in the community center instead of the library. I don't think it's going to change because they're so adept at understanding who we are as Dover and what we need. Um, each year they kind of seem to get it and adapt and do new things. And I will say that the new teen tween librarian that they hired, Toby, he gets kids and are doing some really dynamic things to get young people in the library, not for just looking at books, but to engage in community, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's not
And,
really what you want me to talk about, but I felt like I needed to say that as a library booster.
no, this is actually great. While we were talking, I actually have now a question for you, because I love how creative you can be to find ways to, you know, raise money or grab funding and like all kinds of things. But have you thought of actually using the Buy Nothing Dover Sherborne to get donations to the library?
That's actually that's really interesting. I mean, I'm on Buy Nothing, as you know, I'm on Buy Nothing all the time for my other kind of volunteer work. Um, I think it's possible that the library could use that. I think that Bethany can speak to this. I think that people definitely donate to the library and ask to donate things to the library, and the library has abundance of resources and says no quite a bit for that, because the Friends are so generous with their funding, and we kind of feel I think, and this is a longer term question for Dave, and the Board of Selectmen with our funds, because
Oh,
the
Charlie.
townhouse kind of functions, kind of works on the funds. Like, hopefully we can move some of that fundraising into the funds so we can grow the funds more, and then maybe use those alternate ways of getting donations in the future. But right now we use the Friends money for that. But that's an interesting idea for sure.
I would also say the library already is a really big Buy Nothing resource. We are a place where all the reading material you could look for, the Minuteman Network almost certainly has it, and Rob knows very well that if we don't, we're going to find it for you somewhere else and get it to you. And with the Library of Things, it's this amazing opportunity either to try before you buy, so you don't have to
Yeah.
wonder if you're going to like an Instant Pot or not. Or for the things you only use once or twice a year, you're able to share that community resource. And I very much take your point that this could be an opportunity for the library to be really mindful of its budget. I would also say that 15% threshold that we are mandated to spend in order to retain state certification, all the donations would be in that category, and we can't claim their value as an expenditure. And the budget that we do have is a really robust amount for us to maintain a fresh, inviting, relevant collection on a year-to-year basis. So the donations end up becoming something where we start wondering, where are we going to put it all? But I do very much take that mindset of looking for ways that we can be mindful of the ways that we are spending, and thinking about what the community has to offer too.
I would just like, oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, sorry, Cam. I just wanted to share with everyone who may not know, but it is actually the treasurer collector who has a statutory obligation and responsibility to invest the town's funds. We have not had a full-time treasurer collector for many moons, and this is an area that has been, frankly, neglected. And I thought I would give our new treasurer collector at least 1 week to find out where the facility is before I hit her with this. But one of the reasons we love her so much, she has a lot of investment experience, and also at this town meeting, we're putting in the prudent man investment rule, which allows us to do things like buy the S&P 500 ourselves instead of having to hire someone at 1.8%, which is our current contract, an expense. So this is another deliverable that will be coming, but again, we need the staff to do it. And I had met with the library way back when, because I'm like, what the heck is going on here? 640,000 producing 8. I think that's probably an improvement too.
Yes,
so
there had been nothing for many years.
Exactly. And this is, it's just the biggest no-brainer, but it is a total initiative now that we have a treasurer collector, and we'll be able to help all the town funds from OPEB all the way through to the library and other trust funds. So I just wanted to share with everyone where that some of those side comments and why they were mentioning me and what's going on. It was my first priority. I was all ready to go, and then I'm like, well, we don't have a treasurer collector. This is going to be kind of hard. So anyway, sorry, I just wanted to spit that out.
Well, she's been on the job since Monday. Come on, sure.
Exactly.
And Dave, we thank you for that, because I think the library wants to see itself as kind of a model for other town offices, because we do happen to have so many funds that we can draw upon. And I think it's in a small town. I mean, because I've sat where you've sat, I've seen the budget and what you actually have control of and what you don't have control of. But we also know that our townspeople expect not level service every year, they expect high service. And so when you have this private public partnership, and you can actually leverage the fundraising that we do have in the library, and I think other aspects of the town have that same leverage, maybe haven't used it yet. We can do much more than just what the tax revenue comes in from property taxes, because we can't just tax the Dover Deli and expect to get more funds. So we're excited to be part of that conversation moving forward with the town.
And the Friends are exceptional. I am so impressed by the fundraising that the Friends do without ever once hosting a book sale. Marvelous. We do not have the space to do a book sale. The storage demands are incredible. We don't have enough storage for our coats. So they are really a great group. And the more we can do to really improve the oversight and use of those funds is amazing. So yep, many thanks to.
I'm just curious, do we track like what's like attendance or utilization or how many people come in? Like, how's that going?
We track absolutely everything. The state mandates that we provide an annual report. This is how the state knows whether we qualify for certification. So yes, we track participation in events. We track the events themselves. We track the number of patrons. We track how many materials are borrowed every year, both digital and physical, down to the category of, is it adult fiction or is it children's nonfiction? If it can be counted, we count it. And yeah, circulation is down, but most of our other metrics of use are up. Foot traffic is up. Program participation is up. The number of programs is up. We are really seeing good use of the library in many of its core uses, but circulation is one that shifted a little bit. I think with the changing economy, we're more likely to see circulation increase as well.
Another metric that's been really interesting is that it's something like 83% of the circulation is actually like the people that check out things. It's actually our collection. So Bethany and the librarians do a really good job of making sure that the things that people in Dover want are actually in the Dover Library. And I think that that's really it's great that I'm an outlier. I use all the extra services to get books that they find books in other parts of the country to get for me. But I think the vast majority of citizens get things that are actually at the Dovertown Library, part of the collection, which is really really speaks to what the librarians, they know our community well.
Bethany, I do recall you saying before, I think last year, that you do have all sorts of data and metrics around activity and use and circulation. And I've just discovered now in what you just said that it's the state that requires those sorts of things. What's the history of that? What causes them to focus in on a library in a city or town versus other functions in the town?
So the state commission, that's the right word. The state commission that runs these reports is the Board of Library Commissioners. And they have an obligation to report to the federal level as well. So some of the information they're bringing in goes to the IMLS. So that's a piece of what we're reporting. They take in the the statewide information as well for the certification purposes. They're looking at how to incentivize network participation. Minuteman fully encompasses our geographic region, but the western part of the state, there are still communities that are not part of networks. So the state's always looking to find out, who is that? How can we make that better? And then the state also uses that data for some other functions, particularly around compensation comparisons. So being able to look at community sizes, funding levels, and then salary ranges. So it's all public data. It usually takes about a fiscal year for them to compile and sort and post it. But yeah, the commission does have a mandate to collect that information on behalf of the IMLS and the commission itself.
And I assume you and Rob's board find that quite helpful in the decisions you make and the directions you go in.
Yes, absolutely.
I have an unrelated budget question, not related to the budget. Have you ever thought about making some kind of like human library, like the one that you borrow a human to talk to another human?
Yes, yes, we have. We haven't put a lot of time into it at this point. It is something that some libraries do kind of as a one-off event that bring in a whole bunch of people, go talk amongst yourselves. One initiative that we're going to be launching sometime this spring is doing coffee chats with individual community members. I really hope you'll take up an opportunity to come talk to us, one-on-one chats to find out who are the people in this community? What brings them here? What drives them? What are their interests? And from there to be able to translate that into opportunities for connection and more community. Maybe it's a series of lectures, maybe it's a workshop, maybe it's just bringing like-minded people together to say, you are all in this together. Why don't we come talk?
Yeah,
So yes, we have been thinking about that because
that is really cool.
It's Simone, that's part of the, so last year when my colleague Erin was the chair last year, and she kind of ushered through the our strategic plan that we have. It's at the townhouse if you want to see it in detail, but we endeavor to create a strategic plan for the next kind of number of years, and that's an outgrowth of where we kind of saw the strategic plan going forward. And it's I think it's important for you as a board to know that we take governance very seriously and guidance for the library staff very seriously, and make sure that they have kind of some goalposts. They kind of fill in everything in between, but we make sure that they have kind of a very Dover specific framework to move forward for in the library, and they execute on their own with the details involved, and they do it, I think, really in an excellent way.
Now that is great. I hope that, I would love to see the human library happening, but also in some way a kind of like a cross-generational sort of initiative for that matter. I think particularly in Dover, I think Janet was saying that the increase in, services for the elderly community, but how we bridge this with the young kids also, to make them understand and create a more respectful community in Dover. I think that would be great, and no better place than the library. Sorry, guys.
Challenge accepted.
So I've got a personal comment I wanted to interject. Firstly, I wanted to really say how much I admire your infectious enthusiasm and your creativity in providing new services within the library. I think that's a wonderful asset, and I'm sure there are a lot of libraries in this state that don't have those assets. So thank you so much for that. But my personal comment is that when my kids were at school age, I was always in the library and used it an enormous amount. And then I went through this period where I was working hard, I was traveling a lot, and I just didn't have the time to manage books on top of that. And I fell out of the habit. And then this year, I've got back to the library, and I've been really impressed by the changes, and particularly in the facilities that are now available for circulation. I mean, basically, the Minuteman Library, Libby, and other audio services, and I'm becoming more and more a user of this facility now. So I really have to thank you so much for that. And I know it's got nothing to do with budgets, but I really wanted to make that clear.
And yet it does. It has everything to do with the budget. This is what the budget is supporting, particularly when we're talking about Libby and and the resources and the materials on the shelves. That is the municipal operating budget. We could not provide those kinds of resources without it, both from the angle of the circulating budget itself and the Minuteman membership. Our membership in Minuteman takes our Libby potential from little small local collection to hundreds of thousands of titles. So I watch that very closely to keep the holds lists as short as they can be. But for anyone who is not in the know, library ebook prices are dramatically higher than consumer ebook prices, sometimes 5 to 6 times higher for a 1, maybe 2-year license.
Wow.
So we are doing the best we can to keep up with demand, and it will not actually get much better until there is more consumer input on the way that pricing works. And there is legislation at the state level that's trying to do that.
And our board is working with state officials to kind of encourage them to support that initiative so that our ebooks will be less expensive for our budgets, and have more access to information for our citizens.
I just
Great.
would echo what Cam said about how great the library is and the services they provide. And, I've been taking my grandkids there and I'm amazed at the diversity of materials for small children in such a small town. It just is astounding. And to do that on the budget you do is super impressive to me. So just a little shout out.
I will pass that along to our head of children's services. She manages that budget, that collection single-handedly, and she does such an amazing job of it. I'm really glad that you're seeing that good work too.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Thank you very much. Obviously, most of us have our own personal affinity to the library, but we also, as a committee, appreciate what you do all the time. So thank you for kind of do your presentation.
Thank you. Is
Thank
there any
you.
question anyone wants to throw out about the numbers, or is it all easy to understand and no big deal?
I already put you through the ringer, Bethany, so they're okay now because I
Yeah.
already.
I think
I'm kidding.
you were very clear. Your budget is not an issue for us this year.
Excellent. I'm glad to
Thank
hear
you.
it.
All
Thank you
right.
so much. I appreciate your time.
You guys have some allies on the library trustees who understand the larger context that we're in. So I try we try very hard as a board to we know we listen to guidance very clearly and understand the reality of what our town has, and we try very hard if there's any way to minimize the burden on the taxpayer to do so without changing the vibrancy of the library. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. All right, great. This has been a long meeting, so and we've had a lot of material that we've gone through. Next week we are meeting. Wednesday we have Dawn presenting the school budget. Really give us an update since we've had both a Chickering presentation and the regional school presentation. But she's going to give us an update on version 3 of her budget. And then we have presentations from the citizen petitioners. So Kevin and Simone are working hard to make those as painless as possible.
For you.
I'm very clear it's for us.
And hopefully also for the audience who has to hear it ultimately.
No, it will work well.
All right.
I don't. Mine seem to be okay. No.
Yeah.
Simone, you may have gotten the short straw on that one, I guess. But
well, I think there's going to be a lot of controversy about the site planning petition.
Oh, really?
The sidewalk.
No, sidewalk as well, but there's a petition about the planning board's role in site plans. So,
oh gosh, I felt like that was just such a, I'm meeting with Tom tomorrow, by the way, but I just felt like there was such a benign issue, but I don't know.
It's by no means benign. Wait till you talk to Carol Lisbon about it.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
There have been some very passionate planning board meetings. I'll just leave it there.
I think one could generate as much controversy as the cross street sidewalk.
Oh, wow. Okay. We're literally talking about changing something from A to NA.
Yeah.
But is it wise to change it?
Yeah, that's exactly the question. So that's next week, and then the following week we have open hearing, which is in person. It starts at 7:30. I'd say we should all probably be there by 7:15 or so if possible. And Jim Raffetti's promised he will try and make it as efficient as possible. But as Cam said earlier, the major point of open hearing for us is to hear people's reactions to the articles and get a sense of where the controversies are likely to be, what objections are, those kinds of things. And so it's often a very useful exercise. with that, I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Great, thank you. Okay, Cam,
Yes, please.
Mish, Simone,
Yeah.
Marty, Nina,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
All right, great. All right, well, see you next week.
Thank you all very
Thank you.
much. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Not me.
Thank